The young lady sat and intently read a love story on her phone. She was shocked that the main character was dating Lenance and not Ertain. She was genuinely outraged by her choice. She sincerely did not understand why add a character correction if there was no talk of the hero's repentance. In the world of romance, where gentlemen predominate, who completely devote themselves to girls, Time Trap, a romantic comedy starring hot male characters, mistakes of male heroes leading to misunderstandings, tangled love triangles and other unexpected plot twists, and they are followed by a climax full of regrets, which ends with the main character's miscarriage. A girl who has lost a child demands a divorce right in bed, and the man falls to his knees, as if he would never see her again. Such a scene hooked the young lady so much that she did not miss a single sequel. And then the heroine builds an impenetrable wall. The ex-husband is filled with burning regret and devotion. Although the main character accepted Lennon's confession, she still hoped that in the end, the heroine would reunite with Ertain, but she actually did marry Lennon. The young girl especially knew that this could not only affect her. She didn't understand whether there was any meaning to such an ending at all. She also did not want to remain silent, because she wanted to share her impressions. After writing more than 10 huge comments, she was really tired. The young lady saw a new update. She saw a message from the author. He felt it was wrong to end Time Trap and wanted to try to write an alternative ending, where the main character chooses Ertain over Lennon's. The young girl was shocked. The young lady, in addition to her shock, felt joyful emotions. She couldn't believe this ending. She knew it would take a long time. After all, it was necessary to refine the very structure of the book and the development of plot lines. But she wanted to do everything possible to meet everyone's expectations. She saw that the author's fan service was so amazing that she felt as if she had forgotten how to breathe. She saw that they were going to give her a gift. She was very glad, because now even the shrinkage in her soul was gone. The young lady thought that with such a wonderful mood she could sleep well. She hoped the new chapter would come out soon. Slowly and calmly, she fell into a sweet sleep. Morning has come. The young lady woke up. When she woke up, she didn't understand what she was feeling. She was overcome by unfamiliar feelings and emotions. Opening her eyes, she saw that she was lying in the arms of an attractive man. She was in shock and did not understand what was happening and why there was a man next to her. She didn't understand how a man could even get into her house. She thought that most likely he was a thief or a robber. But she didn't understand why such a handsome man was lying next to her. She thought something stupid was going on. She noticed that even in the early morning, silver hair sparkled mystically, and there was not a hint of dishevelment. She noticed an excellent defined jawline, even eyebrows and a pointed nose that started between them. Eyelashes shine in the morning light, reflecting the sun's rays, and plump scarlet lips glisten. She knew that this was enough to make sure he stepped off the page of a fashion magazine. He had a perfect face. She was shocked and understood that it didn't matter, but she really wanted to know what was going on. The young lady decided to calm down a little and look around the room. She saw that this was not her room. The young lady was in shock because she did not understand what was happening. For a moment, she thought that she had most likely been kidnapped. She saw that her hair color was completely different. She was at a loss. A moment later, the young man grabbed her and laid her down next to him. He hugged her gently and asked if she had woken up yet. He said with a smile on his face that he didn't know she would wake up before him. He said tenderly that he thought she would wake up around noon because after the 4th time, she fell asleep as if she had lost consciousness. The young lady was shocked and perplexed. After his words, she was taken aback and did not understand what was happening. The young man looked at her and said that since they both woke up, they could do it again. He looked at her embarrassedly and, smiling, asked if she would mind and if she would refuse such a chance. The young lady was shocked and did not know what to answer. The young man looked at her intently and kissed her hand and asked her if she still wanted to repeat it. The young lady was shocked. She didn't understand what was happening because she was sure that the guy had made a serious mistake. She was at a loss because she did not fully understand the situation. She saw a small reminder that a special gift had been delivered to a reader who appreciated the novel. The young lady was at a loss. She realized that the young man had not heard the voice that told her that she had received a special gift for the reader. The girl was shocked because she realized that she had become the heroine of the novel Cornea, promoter of the time trap Cornea, which is called Kona for short. She was an orphan abandoned at birth. Usually pretty girls without a family have a harsh fate, but fortunately the girl was born with a weak magical gift. She was able to live a good life. Because of her part-time job, the young lady went to a masquerade party, where she came on behalf of an aristocratic lady with whom she became close. She was quiet and tried to escape, but she had to overcome herself and drink alcohol to get rid of the persistent attention of a man who became attached to her. An aphrodisiac mixed with alcohol can be quite dangerous. The villain, whose name was not mentioned, laughed meanly and tried to steal her, but at that moment, she was saved. Some man drank the remaining alcohol, then chased away the villain. This man was the most filled with the feeling of regret, who ranked first in popularity in the time trap. The effect of the aphrodisiac began to affect the young man. They both felt an uncontrollable desire. From time to time, there seemed to be a spark between them, and in the end, they were in for a very hot night. According to the plot, it was a man, her beloved Eran. But in the original story, Kona was supposed to wake up first and run away. She knew she should follow the original, but everything was already ruined. She knew she had to stop before it was too late. She didn't want to go too far, as there would be no turning back. She knew that if she continued to change the order of actions, she would ruin everything. The young lady tried to gently push the boy away. He looked at her and told her not to say anything. He came closer to her and said that he would do something for her, and her mood would become much better. She was shocked because she was not the same person as yesterday. She knew that if he whispered in her ear with such a face and such a voice, then she would not resist him. She knew that in fact, in the novel, there was often a description of how good the young man was in bed. She decided to distract herself and not look at him so as not to aggravate the situation. Looking at him, she wondered if she really needed to behave like the original. She knew that even if she ran away, he would still find her 4 days later. She constantly ran away, but was caught and returned to the Duke's mansion. He looked at her and started counting down. He said that if she did not answer before he counted to 10, he would take her silence as consent. She was in shock and didn't know what to do or how to behave. The young man looked at the young lady with tenderness and warmth. She could not resist his charms. He smiled and said that she made a good choice. She knew it was a very good time. The young lady was happy with everything and could not write her feeling in words. She knew that Eran had kept his word despite his mood yesterday. The young lady knew that everything was excellent and even better. He looked at her and said with a smile that he would go and wash himself. Eran began to get ready and smiled and said that after he finished with his business, they would talk. The young girl especially knew that she needed to run away immediately. At first she was fascinated by Eran's body and screamed that the original plot did not concern her. But this is not so. Even now it was not too late to escape. She knew that the Duke would not be able to torture Kona. After all, this will turn into an abyss filled with evil. She knew that she would not be able to survive in this world, since it was like hell. She knew she needed to have someone on her side. In the novel, Eran, being an excellent swordsman, had very high sensitivity. She quietly and unnoticed left the room. She knew she needed more time to get used to Kona's body. She wanted to plan what she would do next. Sometimes you have to get rid of changes that might change the original story. She left the place of their meeting, going out into the street. She saw that the sun was almost at its zenith. She knew that although the young lady's memories had almost disappeared, to some extent she could remember where she lived and return there. She stopped the cart in order to get home quickly. With lightning speed, she reached her home. She was glad that she was alive after such an adventure. She noticed that money was especially tight for her, since the bed was like stone. She didn't know what to do next and how to behave, but still she decided to change the ending of the novel. She knew that the reason the author moved her into Kona's body was to make Time Trap into a proper novel about a repentant man. She thought that this must be a sacred and noble revelation from above. She knew that whatever the author's intentions, she would do as she wanted, but since her body would be destroyed, she must lay out a flower path to life with her beloved. She thought that the author should have predicted the reader's behavior in advance. She knew that from this moment, when the logical chain was launched, there should be no interference. Now that she had decided on the route, she had to make a plan. She wanted to systematize the summary contents. Although the main role went to another man, Eran is almost perfect, and he had almost no flaws. There were many dregs of society in his family. The childhood friend he trusted turned out to be very dishonest. He realized too late that those around him and his childhood friend were actually real trash. All the young man's regrets were caused by the mistakes of those around him. Incidents with his brother that occurred even before the icon had a miscarriage. For a moment, the young lady was taken aback. She didn't know whether she got pregnant or not since she spent a hot night with him. She knew that in the original, the heroine did not get pregnant after the ball, but she still had sex with him again in the morning. She was at a loss. The young lady thought that this probably couldn't be true. She knew that due to the nature of her body, Eran infertile, even after one time there is little chance of conceiving a child. She knew that first she had to build her own path. She thought that it was better now for her to act as in the novel. She needed solid evidence that would undermine Eran's trust in Rebecca. As she was writing her plan, she heard a man's voice. It was unexpected and she was a little scared. She didn't know if someone should come to the heroine at such a time. She slowly walked to the door to see who was there. The man opened the door furiously. He was very angry with the young lady. She was shocked by his assertiveness. She didn't know who he was or why he came. She looked at him with a scared look and asked who he was. Kona was very scared because she didn't expect to see anyone. The man angrily pulled her towards him and called her a rat. The young lady was shocked. She didn't understand what was happening. She had vague memories of the body's previous owner, and the unknown man scared her. The man pulled the young lady closer to him and asked her if she thought that he would not know that she was hiding behind a closed door. She was in shock and didn't know what was going on. In a trembling voice, she asked him to let her go. He looked at her with surprise and contempt and asked if she was delusional at all, because the young lady was asking strange questions. He shouted with rage that she forgot to pay for this month yesterday. After his words, the young lady still remembered him. Memories of him surfaced in her head, and not very positive ones. The man's name was Jeffrey. He was nasty and menacing to a fault. He was one of the Sultan's collectors who runs the street where Kona lived. He was truly a brute who kept pushing the young lady on. The morning after the ball, the reason why Kona hastily fled was because of the bribe. He looked at her and asked with a grin if she would finally agree to become his. Little by little, he began to unbutton her dress, anticipating further events. After he unbuttoned her dress, he saw a bruise on her neck. He was furious and in shock. Jeffrey swung his hand to hit her. Suddenly, a young man grabbed him by the hand. Jeffrey was shocked and momentarily taken aback, as he did not expect this. Without letting go of the young lady, he looked at her with fury and asked who this kid was. She was shocked. Kona didn't understand how Eran ended up in her home so quickly. She didn't understand how he was able to find her so quickly. Jeffrey looked at the young man and told him not to interfere in their affairs and to go far away. Because he didn't know who he was, he said he needed to get out, if he wants to stay alive, since the Sultan could easily cut him to pieces. The young man was furious. He pulled the offender's hand away with lightning speed. The young lady was shocked by everything that was happening, but at the same time, she is very glad that he came and saved her. Jeffrey fell to the ground and screamed in pain. The young man looked at the young lady and said that it took him longer to find her than he thought, and he also added that he came to pick her up. The young man looked at the beautiful lady, and lowering his eyes, asked why she ran away from him. He didn't understand her actions, and that made it hard for him. The young lady hesitated. I didn't know what to answer. He looked at her and asked if she was pretending to like her, but in reality she hated him. So much so that she was ready to run away from him. She looked at him intently and could not answer anything as she was a little confused. She knew that everything was not at all as he said. She said that's not the point. The young man looked at her intently and said that all this no longer matters. He came closer to her and said in a gentle voice that this did not change the fact that he intended to collect her. The young man asked if she would go with him. Kona was confused and didn't understand why she was the one. She looked at him and asked if it was because they spent the night together. The young man said that it was not just a night. He knew that their night was unforgettable, and he wanted her to be by his side in the future. He said that there was no point in denying everything that happened between them. Eran told her that he did not need other girls, and he was not a fool who could be deceived by her behavior. Eran looked at her and said that they had unprotected intercourse and now she might be pregnant with his child. The young man said that his blood is so precious that it is practically priceless, and from now on it is his. Sometime later in the Duchy, stunned, young Kona sat and sipped tea. Even though it happened earlier than it should have, being in the castle is an action that corresponds to the canon. She knew that she could be close to her lover. Thinking about him made her feel awkward and embarrassed. She remembered him saying that she was from that moment. His dirty words made her heart flutter. Kona remembered him again and again. She still wanted to be Ayrton's fan. Kona knew now was the time to start preparing. Because the main plan was written out before he even arrived, she didn't know if she was prepared for the events that happened in the beginning. Kona heard a knock on the door. She was sure that he had come. She knew that all actions were taking place as in the canon of the original. Kona stared at the door and said he could come out. The maid came out to her and said that the owner had invited her to dinner. She accepted his invitation and slowly walked towards him. Kona knew that the plan was beginning to take shape. She wanted to carry out the plan and change the ending of the time trap. Kona walked slowly along with the maid. Walking with the maid into the dining room, she noticed that the estate was very quiet. She was glad that no one was there. Kona wondered if he had any relatives at all, but she was glad to know that he didn't. The maid politely showed the master's guest where to go. Entering the hall, she saw a truly beautiful and rich view. The young maid called out to the guest and showed her where she needed to go. She slowly sat down at the table. Kona was very worried because she had to meet her favorite hero. She saw Eran and was amazed by his beauty. Kona couldn't take her eyes off the hero. She noticed that he looked amazing in the shirt. She was confused for a moment. Kona knew she needed to stop thinking about things like that. She noticed that he was wearing a very attractive suit, which emphasized his pectoral muscles. Kona was embarrassed because she thought what would happen after he unbuttoned one button. She looked at him embarrassed. The young man was at a loss. Kona thought that if he unfastened 2 more buttons, then external beauty would definitely be added to his spiritual beauty, and then he will become more sexual. The young man looked at her and said that if she was so uncomfortable, then he would not come while she was eating. Kona hesitated and said there was no need for that. Eran looked at her and asked if the dishes were tasty. The young lady said that everything was delicious and asked when she could return home. This was one of the first phrases spoken by the heroine after arriving at the castle. Eran looked at her and said that everything depended only on her. The young lady was taken aback. She did not understand what he was talking about. He looked at her and said that it would be more accurate to say whether she was carrying his child. The young lady was taken aback and upset after his words. Eran finished his meal and said that they could now go to the room. The young lady knew she had to go and finish her plan. Eran said that they changed her room, and until the new room is ready, she will share the room with him. Kona looked at him silently. She was taken aback. Kona looked at him intently as she was shocked by this news. She didn't expect this from him. She looked at him and said that she felt like there was no way she could escape from him. The young lady was confused, since such a situation was not part of the canon. Moreover, she was taken aback by the fact that she simply wasn't there. Still, she decided to abandon the original course of events for the ending. But she also hasn't done anything yet. In a hurry, Kona asked him to stop for a second, since she had other things to do. He looked at her and told her to call him Eran. Eran looked at her intently over his shoulder. She was shocked. She knew that, according to canon, Eran was supposed to introduce himself only after 24 hours. She noticed that he was still very charming. Kona was a little embarrassed. She said that she would call him that, and also added that she would not run away from him, so they don't need to rush so much. The young man looked sideways at her over his shoulder. He had no intention of letting her go because he was afraid of losing her. The young lady understood that everything was not going according to canon, but she was not sure that this could not harm the plot. She knew that no matter where she slept, in front of people of her kind, the young man would declare that he would take her as his wife. After this, the small fry standing behind Rebecca will bring down all kinds of ridicule and mockery on her. She knew they had a plan to ruin everything. The young people hurriedly entered the room. Kona was confused. She didn't understand why there was such a rush. Eran looked at her and said that she could settle down in this room for a while. The young lady asked him in a trembling voice if she understood correctly that he meant that she would have to live with him. The young man looked at her and said that she understood correctly. Kona slowly and in a trembling voice asked if they should sleep together. The young man was taken aback. He was not prepared for such a question from her. Lowering his eyes in embarrassment, he said with a grin that he was interested in the text of this question. Confused and hesitant, the young lady said that they would share the same bed and do all sorts of wrong things. Eran came closer to the young lady and asked what she meant by wrong things. Ertain said that, as he thought, yesterday's incident was something that was not the most desirable for her. The young lady said in a trembling voice that she meant something completely different. He came closer to her and said that they had already slept together, and even more so, maybe she was carrying his child under her heart. He looked at her and asked if there was anything about this situation that was new or uncomfortable for her. He said he liked making her cry in the morning, but he's not a scumbag who forcefully pins girls down. Moving away from her, he said that it seemed to him that she wanted to wash herself, so he will immediately call the maids. The young lady was embarrassed and said that she did not need a maid at all. He looked at her and said that now he would assign a servant to her, not just for taking a bath. Ertain looked at her and asked if she didn't say she wasn't going to run away. The young lady was shocked by his assertiveness. He came closer to her and said that if she did not want a maid, then they could take a bath together. The young lady was shocked, and she was also fascinated by the young man himself. Kona was shocked by his words. She looked at him intently and could not answer anything. Ertain gently stroked her cheek with his hand. He asked again if she wanted to take a bath together. The young lady was very embarrassed. She didn't know what to answer him. His words frightened her and attracted her at the same time. She knew not to give in to the young man's temptation. She looked away from him, embarrassed. Ertain looked at her closely and smiled. A moment later, he left her to call the servants. After a few minutes, the maids entered their office and asked with a smile if he had called them. The young man looked at the maids and told her that the guests needed to take a bath. The maids said that they understood everything and would immediately carry out his instructions. The young lady slowly followed the maids. Ertain watched her go. Ertain looked at her and said with a smile that if she changed her mind, she could call him when she washed herself, and he will gladly take a bath with her. The young lady was taken aback. Kona was shocked by his words, and she couldn't say anything. She was shocked and thought that if someone else had been in his place, it would have seemed like sexual harassment. But still, she knew that it was just a romantic phrase. The young lady decided to calm down and discard all the sweet seductions that came from the young man, but she still knew that it was very difficult to remain calm. Kona knew she needed to solve the main problem as soon as possible. Kona decided that she would have an unforgettable honeymoon with her beloved. She slowly entered the room to get ready for bathing. Ertain looked at her and asked if she had washed herself. The young lady said shyly that she had already done everything. Ertain looked sideways at the bed and said that she could now rest. The young lady looked at the large, spacious bed and immediately walked towards the bed. Lying in bed, Kona noticed that the bed was quite large and spacious. She knew that the young man fell asleep every day on a huge bed, completely alone. Looking at him, she realized that he usually slept little. Ertain belonged to the noble family of the Duke. He is an honorary commander of the Imperial Knights, a swordsman who goes beyond being hardworking in his work, a man for whom 24 hours a day is not enough. Thanks to the inexplicable magic overwhelming him, he manages to recover in just a couple of hours of sleep. Kona was surprised that such a workaholic still had the strength to make girls cry at night. She knew that he was an excellent character in the novel, even though he had been relegated to a minor character. Kona looked at him intently and could not take her eyes off him, because I noticed that he was stretching his cufflinks and rolling up his sleeves. It was hard for her to look at his muscular and strong arms. She wanted to be next to him every minute and touch his body. Kona knew that in order for tomorrow to come sooner, she needed to sleep well. The young man looked closely at his guests. He was very glad that she was next to him. The young lady woke up and saw Ertain sitting behind documents and working. He looked at her and asked if she had woken up yet. Kona said in a sleepy voice that she was already awake, but she also noticed that he was not sleeping at all. Ertain said that he had just accumulated a lot of work lately and needed to get everything done. The young lady was a little upset because she thought he would sleep next to her. In truth, today he was going to announce that he would marry the young lady. Kona knew she had to be prepared for him to tell everyone about her. Ertain called the maids, who hurried to him. He looked at them and said that everything had to be perfect. The maids hastily began to gather the young lady. They shouted that first they needed to take a bath. Next, they provided her with several outfits to choose from. All the outfits were luxurious. The maid said that a low-cut dress should not be worn because of the marks on her neck. The young lady was a little puzzled, as the mark on her neck seemed brighter than yesterday. Kona looked intently in the mirror and thought that most likely she was just imagining things. She heard the maid tell her that he needed to do his makeup. The maids looked at the young guest. One of the maids said that she had very beautiful eyes. They said it would be much better if she took off her glasses. The young lady looked at them intently and said that she would under no circumstances take off her glasses. They looked at each other puzzled, because they were sorry that she was hiding such beauty under her glasses. The young man was taken aback when he saw Kona. He was amazed by her beauty. The collected Kona went out to her lover. Eran looked at her intently and could not utter a word. A moment later, he came closer to her and said that the outfit suited her very well. The young lady thanked him. He also said that he was very sorry that he did not see the notes he had made. The young lady was embarrassed and very angry with him. Kona couldn't understand how he could complain about such things. The young lady looked intently at her companion, as she could not take her eyes off him. Kona just went crazy because he was very handsome in his new suit. The young lady thought it was a shame that she could not openly express her admiration for him. It seemed to her that his beauty would immediately make her blind. He looked at her and said that it was time for them to go. She looked at him with an admiring glance and said that she was already ready. They walked slowly. The young lady was very worried, because she knew what awaited her. After some time, they came to the place where everything was supposed to happen. The servants bowed obediently and opened the doors. The young man looked intently at everyone and told his companion not to listen to what those around her were saying, since the final decision will still be his. The young lady was very worried, but still, having managed to overcome her excitement, she agreed with him. Eran looked at everyone present and said that he had a few points that he wanted to make before the event began. All those present silently looked at Eran and his companion. He said that the girl who was now sitting next to him would soon become his wife. The young man closely watched the reactions of all the guests present. The guests were shocked by the young man's statement. They didn't expect this from him. The young lady was ready for this, and she knew that a chain reaction had already begun, and it would only get worse. The guests present were outraged by this statement. They shouted at the top of their voices that this simply could not happen. One young man shouted that he knew many noble ladies, but he saw this girl for the first time. The young man, looking at Eran, asked if the girl was of noble blood. The man was outraged by the fact that the young man decided to marry a lady who does not have noble blood. He shouted at Eran and asked him if there had not been talk of marriage with Rebecca until now. He shouted at his master in rage as they knew nothing about the young lady and how and where the young simpleton came from. Eran was furious at his relative's words. He, of course, expected a violent reaction from them, but not this much. He was angry at the insults directed at his companion. With an angry and cold gaze, he looked at the young man who was constantly insulting his companion. In an instant, the young man felt sick and began vomiting blood. Eran looked contemptuously at his wife's offender. He told him to be careful with his words. Eran looked at everyone with a fierce look. The young man looked at everyone with a fierce and contemptuous look and asked them if he hadn't said that this girl was his future wife. The young lady looked warily at her companion. Kona was scared because she didn't expect such a reaction from him. The man looked at everyone present and turned his gaze to his son. He said, "People just talk too much." Relvan said that the young lady was the first girl Eran brought, and such words spoken directly to his face did not offend him in any way. Relvan Velsita looked at his son and asked him for forgiveness, and he also said that the young man should understand them, because until yesterday they thought that he was engaged to Lady Rebecca. Relvan looked at his son and said that they don't even know who this girl is or what she is like. He also looked at his son and softly said with a smile that he had no idea why they decided to get married so quickly. Eran, in turn, did not stand on ceremony and said that they just slept together. The man was a little taken aback by his son's statement. He looked at him and asked with a smile what he was talking about. Eran said they just spent the night together. The young man said that he did not know whether she was pregnant or not. The young man also said that for this reason they decided to get married. The young lady looked at everyone present with confusion. She felt very awkward. The young lady felt uneasy as she thought the young man was a bit clueless. Even when she read Roman for the first time, she believed that he was a real psycho. However, if you watch it live, it's hard to call all this just crazy. She was a little upset because she saw contemptuous looks on herself, and he hadn't even proposed to her yet. The man looked at his son and said that he understands him and his motives. He looked at his son and asked what would happen if the girl was not pregnant at all. Eran said that if a girl carries his child, then she must certainly enter their family. His father looked at him and asked him if she might not be pregnant, if he had decided to marry her too hastily. Eran said time will tell. His father, puzzled, said that in this case it would be worth postponing the marriage until the pregnancy was confirmed. Everyone present watched the discussion with their mouths open. The young man silently looked at everyone present. One of those present approached Eran and apologized for interrupting the family meeting. The young man said that the call was from the imperial palace. Eran was confused and did not understand what had happened. The young lady remembered the sudden call from the imperial palace. Kona knew that in the novel he hesitated for a moment and then said that he would come soon. After all, having introduced his new chosen one to his family, he thought that the most important part was done. Very sensitive, Eran must have sensed the young lady's despair. However, no one sitting in the meeting room could even imagine that the situation would turn out this way. Eran rose slowly from his chair and told them to continue the meeting on their own. She knew that she would be happy to leave with him holding hands, but unfortunately for her, this would not happen, and she knew about it. But still he left her and left. One of the young ladies present looked at everyone, including Kona, and asked for an important topic to be brought up for discussion. She said she didn't think they were told enough about the girl the head of the family had brought. Everyone in the hall confirmed her words and supported her with agreement. Slowly, everyone present raised their hands and voted. They wanted to know more about the young lady. Kona froze in bewilderment. She looked at them contemptuously and wondered where she should start. Kona knew that the fun was about to begin, and she will be the instigator of everything. Kona did not want to show herself weak and decided to go ahead. At this moment, Kona, according to the original plot, could not even object to the insults sent to her. She grew up as an orphan, among ordinary people, and just being in the company of the nobility must have already occupied her. She was probably confused when the young man announced his marriage. Kona decided to put all thoughts aside and immediately concentrate, since everyone would now begin their attacks. First, they asked her what her name was. Kona met their contemptuous glances and said her name. One of the young ladies looked at her and asked why she didn't give her last name and if she was a commoner. Kona looked at her and said with a smile that she had noticed correctly, and Kona was a commoner. She was asked what her parents did. Kona replied that she was an orphan. One young man asked her if it was true what they say that when girls from Peridial turn 12 years old, they go out to sell flowers on the street. They also asked how likely it was that she was pregnant and had stopped menstruating. They also wanted to know if she had ever been in a relationship with their clan head. They slowly asked young Kona all the questions that worried them. They disguised their insults under the guise of questions that came like rain. One of the young ladies said that Kona became pregnant by another man and lied to them that the child was from the head of the family. She looked at her intently and asked if it was awkward to snatch a tasty morsel. Kona understood that it turned out that everything was much worse than she had imagined, but she did not want to leave their ridicule and reproaches so easily. Kona still didn't want to give up so easily. She knew that she would show them all her power. Kona looked at them and asked for forgiveness, but the words of those present were completely wrong. The young lady was taken aback in an instant after hearing Kona's words. Kona said that she first had contact with the gentleman, and it happened 2 evenings ago. The young lady looked at Kona and asked how she could prove it. As one would expect, the first person who spoke negatively made a mistake. Kona wanted this. She already had a plan in her head for such a case. Kona said that pregnancy can be confirmed using a magic test. Kona asked if they knew that it would take a month for this to happen. The young lady was at a loss, but said that she knew about it. She said that if she had become pregnant 2 days ago, she would have tested negative within the next month. The young lady was confused and did not understand why Kona was saying such obvious things. Kona said she would take a pregnancy test a week later. The young lady was confused. Kona said that as the noble lady said, if she had another man's child, the test should already show that she is pregnant. The young lady was shocked. She didn't know what to answer. She looked at everyone present and said that let the lady ask any wizard of her choice to conduct a pregnancy test, and if she was already pregnant, she would kneel in front of them and receive her punishment, and he will immediately leave the Duke's house. But if she is not pregnant, then the young lady will have to take responsibility for her words. The lady was in shock and did not understand what she should take responsibility for. She looked at her with contempt and said angrily that she should take responsibility for what she had just told her, since this was not only an insult for her but also for Mr. Eran. The young lady was shocked and didn't understand what Kona was saying. In a trembling voice, she asked what she was talking about now. She smiled and said that they all said that she got pregnant from another man, and she lied to snatch a tidbit. Kona said that the young lady thought Mr. Eran was so unreasonable that he would be deceived by such an obvious lie. The young lady looked at her in horror. Kona came closer and asked the young lady if she thought that their head of the clan was so stupid that he wanted to make his wife an orphaned commoner and also pregnant from another man in front of everyone. She came closer to the young lady and said that if you have something to say, you should do it in front of the master. The young lady looked at her and asked in a trembling voice why she should do this. Kona smiled and said that, as the young lady had stated, she was just an orphaned commoner. Kona said that she was an outsider and could not condemn the words of such a decent person. Everyone was shocked and perplexed. Kona came closer to the young lady and said that she was the person who insulted Mr. Eran, so he would decide. She sincerely wanted the young lady to go straight to her master and confess that she had offended her. The young lady drooped and said nothing and turned her eyes away from Kona. She was afraid of the master's anger. Kona smiled and asked who else wanted to speak out about her. Kona looked at them intently and said that it seemed to her that they had a lot of questions for her. Everyone was trembling in fear and silently looking at each other. They didn't tell her anything. She looked at them and said that she did not remember which of them said that she could carry another man's child. She looked into the distance and asked if there might be someone in the back row or closer. The father of the head of the clan watched intently what was happening. Looking at the guest, he asked to end the discussion of this topic here. He looked at her and asked if she agreed with his words, and he also addressed those present. Looking at Kona, everyone froze, but a moment later they said that they agreed and the meeting could end. Kona looked at the young lady and said that in this case she would wait for the wizard to examine her. The young lady was extremely frightened. Kona smiled and said, "See you soon." She was glad that she could close their mouths at least for a little while. After some time, the young lady found herself in Eran's dressing room. The maids were doing their best to preen her. She was very glad that she didn't remain silent, but in the original story, Kona didn't push people who didn't like her. Kona knew that further attacks from the aristocrats would be even harsher. Kona already knew that her debut was successful. She knew that in this case it was worth treating herself to something. The young maid approached her mistress and asked if she had called her. She looked at the maid and did not ask her to bring sweets and books in case she got bored. The young maid looked at her mistress and asked what books she preferred. After an awkward silence, the young maid brought the books that my mistress asked for. She saw all the books that the maid brought and was embarrassed, but still she was obliged to read them. Time Trap said that these particular books are incredibly vulgar, but this was not the most important thing, since she chose a gift for herself in the form of a book. She looked intently at a book on the theory of constructing a magic circle. She didn't know if she should become a sorceress, so she thought it would be helpful to read other books that showed female sensibility. She read the book with steel, as there were hot and interesting scenes there. Kona noticed that in the book there is a scene in which a knight conquers a princess, and such a scene takes up more than 30 pages, and immediately after this description, the novel ends. A young gentleman approached her and asked what she was doing, since she was already reading the book very diligently and carefully. The young lady was taken aback, as she did not expect to see him. She looked at him and asked when he arrived. Eran bowed his head and said that he had just arrived. In the blink of an eye, he took the book from her. The young lady was shocked and asked him to give it to her. She didn't want him to see what she was reading. He looked closely at the book and said that he did not know that she was interested in such things. She was embarrassed and didn't know what to answer him. Eran looked at her and asked if she would like to do it herself instead of reading. Kona was shocked and just overwhelmed with desire, but she knew that she had to endure. Kona knew that they couldn't do it until what she had planned happened. Kona looked at him and asked if he had done his business in the imperial palace. The young man looked at his companion and said in a trembling voice that he could say that he had completed everything. While drinking tea, Kona said that this was very wonderful. She knew why he was summoned to the imperial palace, so she barely restrained herself from laughing. He looked at her and asked how the meeting went. Kona sat and looked at him intently. She didn't say anything, because she knew that this question should not be asked to her. She knew that the young master should ask the question to those people who showered her with a hail of insults. An orphan commoner who is behind on her bail payments, alone with a group of people from an aristocratic family, could any of them leave a good impression? Their master made no sense when it came to relationships. It would be strange to expect adequate thoughts on this matter. He looked at her and said that she should get to know the people she would cross paths with in the future. The young lady was a little surprised and amazed by his words, since he had not even proposed to her yet and was already saying similar things. She smiled and said with a smirk that she didn't want to do that. Eran was taken aback. He did not expect such a reaction from the young lady. He looked at her and asked if he heard correctly that she just said that she didn't want to. Kona said that he heard everything correctly, and she really doesn't want to do this. Eran looked at her and asked what was the reason and why she didn't want to. She knew that the plot was exactly the same situation. To Kona, who was depressed due to the insults heaped on her when they met, he said the same words. This time, barely holding back tears, she said she didn't want to see them. Puzzled by these words, Eran contacted the man who was at the meeting to ask what happened. In turn, that person said that she must have been uncomfortable in a new place with strangers. He asked his master how often a girl without parents who grew up among the common people had to meet with aristocrats. The man told his master not to worry so much, and next time he would definitely take care of her comfort. Kona knew that he believed the lies and let the incident go, but when she thought the situation was out of her hands, she didn't like it at all. Kona looked at him and asked why he thought she should continue seeing them. Kona said that in a month the test would show that she was not pregnant, and there would be no reason for her to stay on the estate. Eran was shocked by her words. She said that until then she did not need to meet them. Eran looked at her silently. Kona said she was going to take a pregnancy test in a week. The young man was indignant and asked what nonsense she was saying. He looked at her and asked if she hadn't said that it takes a month to confirm pregnancy, and before that, an examination needs to be done to confirm. She said that an examination needed to be carried out to confirm that he was the father of the unborn child. The young man was shocked and asked if she could be pregnant from another man. Eran asked if he wasn't her first partner. Kona said that no matter what the truth is, even if it is not guilt now, there are people who will only calm down when they get to the bottom of the truth. He looked at her with fury and asked who told her such things. Eran was shocked and also very angry at everyone who dared to say something like that to her. Eran was very angry, and she, in turn, liked his reaction. She deliberately provoked him to such emotions. She would find it funny. If she had named everyone, they would have been in trouble. But since he has already gotten to the bottom of the problem, her words can lead to unpleasant consequences. She smiled and said that she did not remember the names and faces of the people who were there. Kona knew that he himself would later find out their names and deal with them at his own discretion. She said that since they asked for a pregnancy test, in a few days he would find out who said such words. Eran said there was no need to conduct an inspection. Kona looked at him intently. She really wanted to conduct a check in order to avoid various rumors about herself. Eran said she would never see the man who insulted her again. He swore this to her. Eran was furious at such words addressed to his poor wife. The young lady was very surprised by his words. Kona just couldn't wait to see how it would go. He was the one who hurt the young lady with his rational thinking. His behavior showed his true appearance. She knew that there was still a thrill in forcing the hero to improve. Eran looked at her and said that there were things that he would like to discuss, but he thought that he should go and resolve the issue with the aristocrats. He came closer to her and tenderly said that he would like to discuss what was in that book tomorrow. Eran said that they would finally be able to have a good time outside their home. Eran kissed her ear tenderly. Kona was surprised and in turn very embarrassed by the young man's actions. He said he had a lot to do today, so he asked the young lady to rest for her own pleasure until he returns to her. The young lady was shocked by his actions. Kona stared after him. Eran slowly left her, leaving her alone with her thoughts. When he left, she became all embarrassed because she did not expect such behavior from him. She knew that he turned even the most innocent hints into incredibly erotic ones. Now that she had completely satisfied her needs after reading the book, Kona decided that she needed to move on to something else. She decided to take up the theory of magic. Kona was very glad that she was able to find such an excellent book, as she wanted to study the theory of constructing a magic circle. She knew that the former Kona had magical abilities. Even if their number was slightly greater than that of an ordinary person, she needed to know how to effectively use the crumbs of her talent. The problem was that she needed to use her skill wisely. But she was confused because she didn't know where to start. Although it ended up in Kona's body, and she received her memories, she was not able to obtain all the knowledge that she possessed. Mostly, she lacked memories related to magic, but still, the last time, when she unfortunately met Jeffrey, she managed to remember something. She remembered his name, even if not right away. After a not very pleasant meeting, she knew that her memory was returning gradually. Kona thought that maybe hidden memories came back when she was in familiar situations. Kona thought that she might be able to remember how to use magic as she began to learn something about it. But still, she was scared and didn't know what to do with it. She knew that even the titles of the books were already difficult for her. She was puzzled by this circumstance. The young lady was shocked because she had read the book and did not understand what it was about. After looking at the book, she thought it was some kind of nonsense. Kona is very tired. After reading the book, she didn't know why she was suffering so much. The young lady was shocked and confused. Kona thought that maybe this magic wasn't hers after all. A moment later, she told herself that she couldn't give up so easily. Kona knew that she needed to open the book and quickly look diagonally at the first page. She knew that even if she didn't understand anything, she wouldn't lose anything by reading it. But she was still shocked by the contents of the book. Kona knew it was okay to give up. Kona thought that most likely she was not at all familiar with the theory of magic. She couldn't believe it at all. She had a feeling that in this stupid world science was in charge. She wondered if she could awaken her memory by reading something she didn't know. She was very annoyed. She realized that first of all, she needed to learn the basics from a simple book and then try again to learn what she wanted. The young lady was very tired and decided to lie down for a while in order to figure everything out later. She knew she needed to remember what other books on magic were mentioned in the time trap. The tired young lady fell asleep and woke up from a frantic scream. Kona heard that someone was trying to wake her up. She was in shock and did not understand what was happening. The cute animal looked at her and said that he was very glad that she had finally woken up, and he also called her the chosen reader. He looked at her and said that it was time for the first gift. The young lady was shocked and speechless for a moment. Kona didn't understand what was happening and what kind of strange creature is looking at her. She saw him and was shocked. Because I didn't expect it like that, she was terrified. Kona was frightened of him as she did not expect to see something like that, and he also bared his teeth, which caused her even greater confusion. She had not yet had time to understand the situation and remembered her first meeting with Eran. She remembered the voice that told her then that a special gift had been delivered to her. She looked at the creature and asked if she understood correctly that he was the owner of the voice that sounded in her head. He looked at her and said with a smile that everything was exactly like that, and he was very worried about how her adaptation to this world would go, so he wrote notes. He looked at her and asked if she had calmed down. The young lady said that she had calmed down and took the pillow to show him how calm she was. She looked at him and asked where they were. He said they were in the space inside her dream. He said that he would definitely help their special reader enjoy life trapped in time. He said that they had prepared some special gifts for her. She looked at him and asked what special gifts he was talking about. He silently extended his hand to her. The young lady looked at him in confusion. He looked at her puzzled and asked what she was doing. The young lady was confused and did not understand what he wanted her to do. Looking at her, he said that they should touch their fingertips, like in the creation of Adam, like the alien in the movie. The young lady was confused and said that she would do as he asked. After several minutes of waiting, they touched fingertips and an incomprehensible glow appeared around them. The light illuminated the entire space in which they were located. The day before yesterday, I found myself in this world. She experienced similar feelings. There will be ink one drop at a time, introducing letters into her head and gradually filling it with words. He said that he would help make sure that she fully took over the memories. He said that, of course, everything would not come right away, since receiving a special gift consists of several stages. Her assistant said that the first gift was Kona's knowledge of magic. He said that since this is only the first part, first she should try to accept the sensations, but from next time, she will have to pay the corresponding price for each gift. The young lady was shocked and did not understand what he was talking about. She was shocked and asked if she understood correctly that she had received knowledge about magic. Kona asked if she could use magic with them. He looked at her and puzzledly said that she would receive all the knowledge about magic and asked if she was ready to receive it. The young lady was very happy and said that, of course, she was ready, and hurried him in order to finish completely as soon as possible. He smiled and said that in that case they agreed, and they would try to awaken the memories now. And gradually they will move on to learning. The young lady was confused. Kona did not understand what kind of training he was talking about and asked him to tell him in more detail. She was shocked, and didn't know if it was true that she heard him say that she needed to learn something. She looked at him and asked if he wanted to just download the knowledge into her head. He smiled an insidious smile and said that it's not for nothing that everyone says that it's very easy to catch people, but still he said that you need to start with the first chapter of the theory of magic formulas, adding that she had already accepted the gift, so it was impossible to refuse it. Young Lennon began to study, but in turn she made mistakes. Her sweet assistant corrected her and told her how to write the symbols correctly, and also demanded that she try more. According to the elf, the ratio of time between the real world and the world of dreams is approximately 1 to 60. 1 hour in a dream is equal to 1 minute in reality. If she sleeps 8 hours, she spends time here for about 20 days. Kona was shocked that she had to suffer in such a place for 20 days. Even though her spiritual body was here, there was not even a break for sleep or food. The young lady asked the elf what about her bed. He said that it was not necessary during the training process. The elf was furious and shouted that she was writing too slowly, but needed to be faster and more accurate. The young lady was shocked, as she didn't even fully understand the formula yet. The elf looked at her, puzzled, and asked if she couldn't just remember everything. The young lady was a little upset and did not say anything to his reproaches. He said that the length of her stay here depends on how much she sleeps. She was shocked. He said it would be nice to probably spend a year or so sleeping with him. 30 days later, he saw that she was finally finished. He was glad that in 30 days the respected reader managed to comprehend the basics of the theory of magic. He was very happy about this. Young Kona was shocked, because I knew that such training could not be called a gift. She knew that this was simply the result of her hard work, which in the end exhausted her. He thanked her for her efforts and said that she would receive the next gift in 5 days. He said goodbye to her with a smile and said that they would meet in 5 days. She was angry with him because she knew that this was only the beginning of her torment. He smiled and said goodbye again. The young lady was very angry with him and mentally wanted to hit him so that he would not mock her. Suddenly she woke up, and not in the way she expected. She woke up in a cold sweat and with shortness of breath. She noticed that it was all very difficult. Her thoughts flew away as soon as she heard a familiar voice. Eran asked whether she was awake or not. A moment later, she saw a young man who was looking at her intently. He came closer to her and hugged her. Eran said he thought she was having a nightmare. He gently reassured her and told her that it was just a dream and she did not need to worry about it. He was upset because he wasn't there for her. She was confused because she felt calmer around him, as if she was being consoled by an old friend. But he is just a person whom Kona met just a couple of days ago. And even though these were ordinary, mechanical, insensitive words from a person who had upset the previous owner of the body, still at that moment Kona, for some reason, felt comfort. She knew that this was all because the evil assistant covered in a wasabi mask had tortured her and exhausted her. She knew that his warmth would give her peace of mind. Maybe it's because it was very difficult for her in the dream, but she was still glad that he supported her. That's why she was so touched by the words of the calculating young man. She was ready to listen to his calculating speeches. He looked at her and said that the doctor said that she was physically and mentally exhausted, which is why she fell into a deep sleep. She agreed with him and said that it seemed that way. Eran asked her how she was feeling, and he also asked if she should call a doctor, because he was worried about her state of health. She said in a quiet and calm voice that there was no need for this, and that she was fine. Kona knew that enjoying his beautiful body was the best medicine for her. The young man said that her presence in the castle must have been very difficult for her. The young lady said that he noticed everything correctly. Eran said that he should have been more courteous to her, but he didn't think about it. The young lady was surprised by his behavior as he was saying strange things. Kona didn't understand how much she slept that he could continue to say such things. He said by the way that Brienne, who insulted her, was kicked out of the family. She was shocked because she didn't expect him to say something like that. Kona knew that the girl, whose name was not even mentioned in the novel, had disappeared as quietly as she had appeared. She was even glad about it. Kona knew that this would be a punishment for everyone. He looked at her and said that even though she felt out of place, she had a special place in the estate. The young lady was a little puzzled and asked what special place he was talking about. He looked at her and said warmly that he thought he would be able to show her off to a special place that evening. The young lady was shocked and also confused, because I knew that such a plot twist was not written in the original. The young lady looked at him and said that she would be interested to know what special place he was talking about. Eran said that when the time comes, then she will know. Kona knew that such surprises were not at all in Eran's nature. She felt there was a catch in this. All she knew was that she had to find out what this special place was. She said she is still uneasy about yesterday's incident. She said that she thought she would feel better if she heard something pleasant. Kona lowered her eyes and asked if he could give her at least a little hint. Looking at the young man, she realized that she had succeeded, and he would soon tell her everything. She looked at him with pleading eyes. Without looking away, she looked at him intently so that he would soften and tell her something. Eran said there will be a formal dinner tonight. He wasn't very happy about this, but he had no choice. The young lady was puzzled and asked what kind of formal dinner it was. He said that this is the name of the meeting at which the elders of the clan are present. The young lady was shocked because she knew there was a catch in his words. And then she heard him. He said everyone was sorry about what happened yesterday and they would like to apologize. The young lady knew that this sounded quite funny, since she understood that they had no intention of apologizing to her. She didn't understand why they suddenly wanted to reschedule their apologies. She knew that all the secrets were watching her and Eran. They must want to figure out her weaknesses. Dinner with the oldest members of the family was mentioned in the original. Without much detail, she didn't know if something would go wrong in canon. She looked at her companion and said that sounded wonderful. Eran looked at her and said with a smile that he knew it was getting her engaged. She looked at him and said with a smile that she couldn't wait to meet them. She wanted to show him their true faces. Eran looked at her and told her not to tell them that he had already told her about dinner. Young Kona agreed and said that they would do so. Kona was confused as yesterday's humiliation was not enough for them. She knew they were desperate to humiliate her at dinner, in order to show the head of the clan that he chose the wrong person as his wife. But still, she wanted to show them at dinner what she was really worth and what she was capable of. She didn't want to give them a reason to humiliate her. He looked at her and said that her mood seemed to be better, so he wanted to talk to her about something. The young lady was puzzled and asked what he wanted to talk to her about. She didn't know what he wanted to tell her, since they had nothing else to discuss. He looked away embarrassedly and said that he wanted to talk to her about the books that she read yesterday. The young lady was shocked and perplexed by his words. She was embarrassed and didn't know what to talk to him about. Eran looked at her and asked if she liked doing such things outside the home. Kona was shocked because she didn't expect him to say something like that. He looked at her and said that as long as he was with her, it didn't matter to him. The young lady was a little embarrassed by this statement. She didn't know what to answer him or how to behave in such a situation. He hugged her gently and whispered in her ear that now they could do this, even here, since he was already horny enough. He desired her with all his body and hoped for reciprocity on her part. He looked at her and asked what about her. He could not take his eyes off her, since Kona was the most beautiful of all. Eran really wanted to enjoy it to the fullest. She was shocked and didn't understand why the author made this guy so killer hot. Kona simply could not resist his charms. She wanted to forget about the canon and her plan and just enjoy this wonderful time with him. But still she knew that it was very dangerous. In fact, if something happens other than the altered original, she may face deadly dangerous problems. Kona wanted to wait until she felt safe. Looking away, Kona apologized to them and said that she didn't feel like it right now. The young man was surprised by this answer. He expected a completely different reaction from her. Eran was very upset after her words. He said that he understood everything and that he was asking too much from a person who had recently tried to escape from him. Kona could hear the grief and anger in his voice. Without looking in her direction, he took the clothes and said that in that case, he would go. He didn't want to be around her for a while. Looking at the door, he said that she should now devote more time to rest. She was shocked because she understood that he was offended by her. Kona wanted to be close to him, but unfortunately, she could not afford this, since she did not know what the consequences would be. She was irritated and infuriated by everything, because she really wanted to spend time with him. But unfortunately, she needed to think about a plan. but it still upset her very much. She was shocked that he was begging her like that, and she could hardly resist his charms. Kona was shocked and wanted to torture him very well at dinner, because he behaved very incorrectly towards her. She knew that perhaps she should read the book she was interested in order to relax a little. Kona wanted to push him out of her thoughts and do something else. She didn't know if training with the green elf would have any effect when she read the book. She was shocked because she understood everything that was written there. Kona didn't expect this at all. She understood that her torment and hard work during sleep were not in vain, and she was very happy about this fact. In the blink of an eye, she saw a certain glow and began to remember everything that happened to the previous owner of the body. With her level of magic, she doesn't have many options. She saw the body's previous owner's memories of magic. How her parents abandoned her came back to her. Clutching at the barely noticeable thread of her talent, the young lady constantly trained and experimented. She was shocked, as it was very difficult for the previous owner of the body. Kona saw and felt everything she experienced in a short time. She could not hold back her tears, since such a part of the young lady's life was not described in the novel. But even if it was, then for some reason she didn't pay attention to it, as if it was just a set of letters, and now it had become her memories. It's a strange feeling, but the memories were not bad at all. She placed her hand on her heaving chest and closed her eyes for a second. It was a tribute to a real heroine. After a few minutes of being alone with herself, her memories stopped coming. She was very happy that she could now use magic for her own purposes. She now wanted to try to concentrate the magic inside her body. In the books of magic, which she did not even suspect about, obediently obey her will. Kona wanted to immediately find out what kind of magic the previous owner possessed. Her magical abilities were weak, and therefore she could not use magic so that the effect was noticeable. Therefore, in order to fully cast magic, she needs to use something like magic circles or potions, and this requires careful preparation. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The magic that the previous owner used is quite good. She knew that she needed to study a lot of literature in order to improve her abilities. The young lady took the book to begin studying, but she noticed something interesting. She was shocked because she noticed that she could now lift heavy books with just one finger. She really liked it and was happy about it. She had body enhancement magic, which is just a weak magical ability that makes her fingers stronger. But even though she can only use the gift in everyday life, his help already makes her happy. She knew she had to get ready for the formal dinner. Kona wanted to remember how this dinner went in the original story. In the evening, a maid approached her and said that she needed to get ready. The young lady agreed with her and slowly went to get ready. She knew what awaited her, and therefore she wanted everything to go as it should. After all the preparations, she saw the young man. Erdi was wonderful. For a moment she froze looking at him. He looked at her intently and said in a soft voice that they needed to go. She knew that the forces of evil that did not allow her to lead a calm, virtuous life were waiting for her. She wanted to remove everything that bothered her and live in peace. Upon entering the room, they were greeted. Kona saw the elders of a powerful family. The young people greeted the elders in return. The young lady noticed 5 already familiar faces, one of whom was Ertain's father. He looked closely at Kona and smiled at her. She saw the remaining 4 at the meeting but did not know their names. And the woman who was sitting surrounded by men was the only one who did not raise her hand during the discussions. The young man looked at everyone present and asked if Mr. Larnack would come. One of the men present said that the gentleman had urgent business, so he won't come. Ertain looked at them and said that in this case, all that remains is to wait for Mrs. Elgina and everyone will be gathered. The man looked at Ertain and said that the aristocrat did not even attend the meeting. He didn't understand why she suddenly had to come to dinner. Everyone looked intently at the young girl. They devoured her with their gaze. Kona knew this was just the beginning. Ertain's father smiled and introduced himself to the young lady. He said that they had gathered for dinner to apologize for yesterday. The man looked at her and said that he was very sorry that he could not speak up when the aristocracy acted disrespectful towards her at the meeting. Another man supported his words and said that he also should not have remained silent then, but the young ladies had such a heated conversation that resentments and misunderstandings would have arisen in any case. He looked at the young lady and said that he would like to resolve all the misunderstandings right here and now. She knew it was simply incredible. Kona was shocked that they changed their minds and attitude towards her so quickly. in front of Eran. She looked at them and asked with a smirk what they called misunderstanding. She knew that now the fun would begin. Everyone present was shocked and did not know what to answer her. They didn't know she would say something like that. They thought she would meekly accept their apology. She understood the words of each of them perfectly. She always remained silent, enduring their attacks and insults. Kona didn't understand why they considered this a misunderstanding. She desperately wanted to show their true faces. She looked so stupid that it seemed as if she could believe their words. But unfortunately, the right time for her triumph has not yet come. Only 3 days have passed since she got into the castle, and she has not found anyone she can trust. Kona knew that even Eran could turn on her at any moment, and she had to rely only on herself. She looked at them and said that they seemed to be confusing something. And this is nothing more than a misunderstanding. They were confused and did not know what to answer her, because they didn't expect this from her. She smiled and said that they had it all wrong, and she was truly grateful. The man was shocked and asked in a trembling voice if gratitude was true. She said that they had witnessed the insults that she and Mr. Eran received during the meeting. The men breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile that it was so, and they were just witnesses to erroneous judgments. The man smiled and said that he didn't even think that she would remember them. Smiling, they said that now they understand why their Glova liked the young lady so much. Unlike other ladies, she is very polite. The young lady was very infuriated by everything, and that includes their conversations, but it could be considered that she was taking 1 step back before she could take 2 steps forward. She knew that before getting rid of her, the men would pretend that they repented, so she was obliged to show her arrogant attitude towards them. A maid approached the young lady. She brought very cute and tasty treats. The young lady was shocked, as it was quite nice of her, and the treats looked very tasty and cute. The young lady truly admired and enjoyed the meal. The man smiled at the young lady and said that such snacks are eaten a little differently. Kona knew what was about to begin. He looked at her and said that this particular dish should be eaten with your hands. Kona knew that they would deliberately make comments to her in order to humiliate her and show her low position. The young lady took his advice. He looked at her and said that she grasps everything on the fly. The young lady thanked her for the advice, but in my heart I could barely contain my emotions. After this, open mockery of Kona continued. The man looked at her and said with a grin that a girl who was not used to this would have to learn a lot. She was furious, but decided to restrain herself. The young lady was very angry and wanted to hit the man. In any case, because they now consider their instructions to be appropriate, things are not as bad as they were during the time trap. Kona knew that the heroine had it much more difficult. She recalled how the heroine was constantly mocked and insulted, and told that she was holding a knife incorrectly and that she was putting sauce on a fruit fork. Then the real owner of the body was very worried about the incessant waves of criticism in her direction. She even dropped her fork several times and spilled water, and it all ended with her throwing up in the bathroom because of food that she barely touched. Inattentive Eran didn't even understand that Kona was openly insulted then. All he said was that he would appoint an etiquette teacher, and he said nothing more and did not even come to her defense. The old man, who seemed to have been waiting for a turning point for a long time, promised to provide an etiquette teacher, and Kanya had to deal with this pervert teacher. It was very difficult for her to listen to reproaches in her direction, but it was still harder to listen to all the ridicule and reproaches of the real owner of the body. She didn't understand how the real Kona could withstand something like this. The man looked at the young lady and said that he was very good at etiquette, so he could help her. He said that he had a very good etiquette teacher. The young lady was very angry and excited. She clenched the fork in her hand and threw it on the floor. Everyone present was surprised by her behavior. She looked puzzled at everyone present and asked for forgiveness in a trembling voice. The young lady looked at Eran and asked what she should do, since she felt weakness in her arms, as if the shock of yesterday had not yet passed. She wanted to play with them a little and embarrass them. The young lady looked at the guest who was offering her his help and apologized to him. She looked at Eran and asked if he could help her with something. The young man asked what they were talking about. Kona said it would be great if he cut food for her. Everyone present was shocked. They didn't understand how she could ask him for something like that. They didn't expect that she would ask the head of the clan to cut her food. This was unacceptable to them. The young man slowly approached her and began slicing the meat. He looked at her and asked if she needed help with anything else. The young lady looked at the cutlery, puzzled, and said that she still didn't know how to use a fork properly. She said that she would be very glad if the gentleman showed her what to do. Slowly, he began to show her how and what food to eat correctly. Everyone present was a little dumbfounded by this behavior of the young people. Eran slowly showed how a young lady should behave during dinner. The young lady grasped his teachings on the fly. She also decided to feed him. The young man was embarrassed by her behavior. But still, he did not refuse this, after which he also began to feed her. The young lady was very happy, because the food was very tasty. All those present looked at them puzzled. They were very embarrassed by this behavior of the young people. She looked at the young man and asked for forgiveness, since she had not shown herself well enough at the meeting with the elders. Eran said that she would learn everything gradually. He looked at the elders and said that even they should take this with a smile. His father smiled and said that of course it was, because dining etiquette is something that cannot be mastered right away. He decided to hold his son for a while. The young lady looked at the elder and asked if she could just eat here now, because she can't just enjoy dinner while she continues to receive all the comments. The young man looked at his companion and said that he himself would personally teach her etiquette, and this did not concern the others. She was shocked because she did not expect this from him. For a moment, everyone froze, and a heavy atmosphere appeared in the hall. The young lady was very pleased as the situation was resolved successfully, and fortunately in her direction. She knew she had less problems now. She was very glad that she had already dealt with the biggest problem, but there was something else left. The only person who does not cause her problems, and even now remains silent. If her assumptions are correct, then it is probably Anaela Velsita is Eran's maternal aunt. If you remember the original story, she should talk to her after dinner. But now everything was a little different. Kona didn't know if Aunt Eran would talk to her. She didn't think much about her, but still closely observed her behavior. She didn't want to have any conflicts with her. Eran greeted his aunt. She looked at him and told him not to call her aunt. After all, she is not even involved in his family. She looked at him and asked if he had decided to take this child's wife. He said that she said everything correctly, and he intends to take her as his wife. She looked at the young lady with contempt and said that she had heard rumors that she was a commoner. She asked if it was true. The young lady was taken aback, as she did not expect such a reaction. Eran was in turn outraged by his aunt's behavior. He knew he would be outraged, but her behavior was extremely inappropriate. She looked at him and said that a wedding with this girl is unacceptable. The young lady was shocked as the woman openly expressed her disagreement with the marriage, right in front of Eran. Kona did not expect this at all. She was surprised, but in turn admired the Iron Woman. His aunt looked at him and asked if he had decided to ruin his family. She said that the marriage of the head of the dynasty is a significant event not only for himself. She didn't understand how someone could be so irresponsible and obscene about such things. The young lady was shocked and did not understand how the Duke could be surrounded by people who could speak so straightforwardly. Kona thought that they were just puppets in the hands of the evil Rebecca, but still she could not remember her. The young man looked at his aunt and said that this was not a rash act. He was furious that she would say such things. She was shocked and said that he brought the girl he met 3 days ago to make her the mistress of his family. She asked if she understood him correctly, that he had weighed everything. The young man's father asked Elgina to watch her words. He also said that this issue had already been resolved at a family meeting, and if the head of the family was driven into a corner now, it could have a bad effect on his reputation. She said there was more to the leader's reputation than just his choice of mate. It seemed to her that everything was not so serious with them. She said that the pregnancy has not yet been confirmed, so it is necessary to find out everything right now. He looked at her and said that he believed that by discussing everything here, they would only complicate things. He also said that they could discuss this in private as much as they wanted. The young lady was shocked by everything that was happening. She did not expect such a turn of events. Kona didn't remember such events happening in the original story. She diligently played the good orphan commoner, but she did not know whether the head of the clan should worry about her reputation. She knew that she had no selfish goals, but unfortunately, people thought differently. The young man looked at his aunt and said that his father was absolutely right. Eran said this was not the right place to discuss such issues. His aunt said she didn't understand why they thought the discussion was inappropriate. She looked at him and asked with a smirk if it might be a good idea to bring up such a topic at the family meeting next month. The young man said that this means that he will be able to see her at the meeting next time. The young lady was shocked by everything that was happening. She didn't expect them to have such a discussion. Only one person can call her aunt. His mother is also famous as the former head of the dynasty. She was the only daughter, and Eran simply cannot have an aunt. However, in his youth, his mother had a sworn sister from a small family, and this sister's name was Elgina. Several years ago, when Eran's mother's health rapidly deteriorated, she was appointed deputy head of the dynasty. Since Eran became the temporary head of the clan, Elgina lived in a secluded mansion and did not go anywhere. The young man looked at them and said that whether they agreed to it or not, he himself chose this girl. He looked at her and asked if they should respect his choice, given that she had already retired. She looked at him and said that his words sounded much bolder. Kona was glad that he was starting to change. She walked away from them and said that in that case she would wait for him in the office. He calmly said that he would come to her soon. She said that she really hoped that he would find compelling arguments to convince them all. The young man looked after her intently. He knew that he would have a difficult conversation with his aunt. The young lady was puzzled and did not understand why his named aunt came to the estate. She knew that everything was going wrong. She understood that she had changed the canon, but hoped that nothing terrible would happen. Kona didn't know what to do next or how to behave. Eran looked at everyone and said that he had to take his leave first. His father looked at him intently and said that he understood everything, since his aunt was waiting for him. The young lady smiled and said that it was time for her to go too. She thanked the elders with a smile for the very pleasant welcome. Everyone looked after them intently. Eran looked at his companion and said that he invited her here, but now he even feels embarrassed, because it ruined her mood. The young lady smiled and said everything was fine. A moment later, with a smile, she said that at least she had learned how to use a fork correctly. The young man was puzzled by this reaction from his companion. He looked at her intently, without taking his eyes off. He looked at her and told her not to worry about anything and to rest in their room. The young lady smiled and did not say anything to him in the end. She hoped that at least now she could go and continue her work on the plan. Suddenly someone called her. Kona was surprised because she didn't expect this. The woman looked at her and said that she would like to talk to her for a moment and asked if she had a minute. The young lady was excited and shocked, but still agreed to talk a little. The woman looked at the young lady and apologized for what the head said earlier at dinner. She looked at young lady and asked if their words upset her very much. She knew that it was unpleasant for Kona to be treated so rudely. The young lady knew that everything was happening as in the original. She smiled and said that it wasn't like that at all. Everyone just shouted that she didn't belong there. She was very sorry that she was treated this way. She asked for forgiveness for the sudden departure of her head and also asked for forgiveness for not standing up for her then. She felt very sorry for Kona. She said that she was very ashamed because she was an elder. Kona was shocked by the woman's statements. Kona did not expect such a warm attitude towards her person. She looked at her and said that she would still really like to help her from now on. Kona was shocked by this statement. Kona did not expect this, but in turn was very happy about it, because she was able to find a supporter she could trust. Kona looked closely at the woman and asked if permission was needed to help. She said that her words alone already made her happy. The woman thanked the young lady and said that if her deceased niece were still alive, she would be the same age as the lady. She looked at young lady and asked if she could consider her niece. The young lady said that, of course, it was possible, but also asked her not to belittle herself and to call her by name. The young lady looked at her and asked if she could call her aunt in that case. The woman was very happy and said that, of course, it was possible. Kona was very glad that it was finally over and she could rest. She understood that she was a woman treating her the same way as in the novel, and this made her very happy. But she also knew that now the biggest problem she has is her relationship with her, said Aunt Eran. The original said that she was something of a puppet, but she is the representative of the former head of the Duchy. Considering that the husband of Eran's mother, this choice was very significant and bold. This is almost the same as appointing an outsider as the head of the family and forgetting about your spouse. The young lady knew that there was most likely a big fuss because she had been replacing the head for several years now, probably because she was competent enough to handle all the problems. Having transferred her powers to Eran, she lived on the outskirts. like a servant. But it was impossible to ignore all the connections she had made over the years. Kona knew she couldn't let her outplay her. Kona knew that when her lover returned, she urgently needed to find out what they were talking about. The young man came to her and saw that she was sleeping very sweetly. He noticed that she had fallen asleep in a rather uncomfortable position. He tried to wake her up as she had fallen asleep sitting in bed. He came closer to her and asked if she was uncomfortable. She was shocked as she saw his beautiful and handsome face. When she woke up, she was surprised that he came so quickly. He looked at her and asked why she was sitting so awkwardly instead of lying down and relaxing. Kona said she waited for him to return, but still fell asleep. He was surprised by her statement and looked at her intently without taking his eyes off. He sat down on the bed and sheepishly asked if he understood correctly that she said she was waiting for him. Eran said that if he had known that she was waiting for him, he would have returned to her as soon as possible. The young lady decided to quickly change the topic and find out what he was talking about with the said aunt. Kona looked at him and said that he called her aunt, which means she is his mother's sister. The young man said that everything was completely wrong and she was not his aunt. He looked at his companion and said that she was much closer to him than she might seem on. The young lady was a little surprised by his statements. She looked at him and said that she felt like he really respected her. Kona said he was in trouble because of her and she regretted it. He looked at her and said that 2 days ago, he already told her not to address him as master. In a trembling voice, she addressed him by name. She felt awkward. He looked at her intently and asked her to repeat it again. The young lady looked at him shyly and said his name. He looked at her intently and asked her not to address him by title or not to call him master, and then simply call him by his name. She knew that after such a scene, a kiss should follow. She knew that this could not be allowed, and looked at him embarrassedly and asked what the mistress had told him. She asked, puzzled, what he was talking to her about. The young man was perplexed. He looked closely at his companion and said that they were talking about her. She was a little puzzled. He looked at her and asked if she was interested in what awaited him. The young lady was a little perplexed and did not understand what exactly he was talking about. He realized that she was actually waiting for him just for this reason. He said that she still couldn't wait for him just like that. The young man began to leave in a hurry. The young lady shouted after him to wait. He looked at her and said that she must have guessed what conversation had taken place between him and his aunt. He looked sideways at her and said that, unfortunately for her, the conversation was not what she expected. Eran looked at Kona and said that, unfortunately, what they discussed was not what she would have expected. So this time his aunt decided not to confront their relationship. The young lady was shocked by such a statement. She couldn't say a word. He said that he thought that his aunt had a somewhat unbelievable understanding of what was going on between them, so he had to explain everything to her. He said that after listening to his words, she said that she would look after her for a while. Kona was afraid that her aunt would interfere with her plan, but after the young man's words, Kona realized that everything had worked out, although she was very embarrassed by the phrase this time. He looked at her and said that she was even so upset that she was even sighing heavily. The young lady was taken aback, not knowing what to answer him. He said he didn't like how she was always looking to get away from him. A moment later, Eran said that this helped prove to his aunt that her fears were completely unfounded. She looked at him and asked if he could tell him what the two of them were talking about in private. The young man said he couldn't. The young lady was very upset, because she understood that there was little hope that he would tell her anything. Still, Eran, who usually made trouble out of nothing, thought the conversation went well. This calmed her down. She didn't know if she should thank him a little. She smiled and said that she was grateful to him anyway. Eran was perplexed and did not understand what exactly she was grateful for. Kona smiled and said that he must have said something really nice about her, since his words affected his aunt, who even publicly opposed their marriage and backed down. Kona thought that, most likely, Mr. Eran recommended her properly. He looked at her with a stern look and told her not to call him Mr. Eran, but simply Eran. The young lady was puzzled since she thanked him, and he took note of the polite address personally. He looked at her and said that she seemed to need time to process the new information. He said that because it was noticeable, even during dinner the young lady was puzzled by his words. He looked at her and said that she also needed training. Kona was surprised. He said that if the others constantly made comments to her about not following etiquette, it would not do any good. He said that etiquette training should begin tomorrow. The young lady was surprised because she did not think that everything would happen so quickly. She didn't understand why he insisted on learning. She looked at him and said that it was still unknown whether she would be here in a month. Kona knew that in this case there was no need for training. She looked at him and said that there was no point. And there's really no need to study etiquette if she leaves the estate, and until then she doesn't see the point in all this. She looked at him intently and did not know whether he would be stubborn after her words. He looked at her and said that of course there is logic in this, but still he did not intend to give up just like that. Leaving her, he said that training does not take a day or even two. He said there was an event he would like to attend with her, and the educational process could take about 3 weeks. The young lady was surprised and did not understand what he was talking about and why he wanted to attend the event with her. The young man looked at her and said that he had a proposal. He said that he interrogated the bandit who broke into her house the other day and behaved very rudely. He said that once a month she pays about 2 gold coins to the head of the slum to get protection in exchange for this bribe. However, this month she did not pay her share. Eran looked at her and asked how she was going to return there after a month, since she would already have a debt of 4 gold pieces. The young lady knew the value of money in the novel, and in the real world she was a little dumbfounded. After calculating the final amount, she was shocked. The young man looked at her and said if she agreed to study etiquette, he would take care of her payments. She was sincerely shocked by such a statement, as she had not hoped for such a thing. He said that while on the estate she had no opportunity to earn money. So these are still lucrative offers. She was a little puzzled by such a lucrative offer. She knew that his family was one of the richest families in the empire. Kona was shocked that he wanted to hold a person for 1 month and only pay 4 gold pieces. She looked at him and realized that this was not a very profitable offer, and she realized that he was greedy. Eran said that 3 weeks later there will be a reception organized by the family, outdoors, with many other families in attendance. He said that if she learned etiquette and attended the reception, she would show good results. And in return, he will fulfill her every wish. She looked at him intently as she was surprised that he could fulfill any desire. He looked at her and said with a smile that it would be more accurate to say that he would do everything she asked. She was very happy and looked at him and asked if she could ask him to let her out of the castle. The young man said that this would not work. She realized that he was still stubborn. She looked at him and asked what would happen if she asked him to make her the head of the clan. He said he didn't think it was what she needed. He asked with a smile what she would really like. He said that a request is a desire that another person can satisfy. He looked at her and asked her to ask him to do what he could. She said that she didn't know what to ask him, sighing heavily. She asked what was the limitation in her wish. He said that she could ask for a round sum of money, which would be enough to buy a mansion in the center of the city, or she could wish for jewelry or rare treasures. He may even temporarily gain the status of a lower-level aristocrat. He said that he would let him know if this was within his capabilities, so that she would not ask. Considering how huge the family of the Duke is, this does not seem impossible, and the question was not even about money, but still Kona knew that it would be very useful for her to have such a lucky card from Eran. She looked at him and asked how her work would be graded. He said that, firstly, she must use cutlery impeccably at the dinner table. He also said that she should not leave the reception until it was over. If she can stay there for up to 10 hours and not make any mistakes, then we can say that she has completed the task. And if not, it will be a failure. He said that no one would even think of insulting her. But if, nevertheless, someone insults her or something else happens, he will immediately admit that she has completely coped with it. The young lady smiled and said that she agreed to such conditions and was ready to try. He smiled and said she made a very smart choice. He looked at her and said that in that case, she should go to bed already. The young lady looked at him and asked if he would sleep. The young man said that he was going to lie down only after he finished with the remaining work. Kona looked at him and asked if it was because she was taking up his bed. He looked at her and said that maybe it was so, but he didn't understand what she could do. She was surprised by his words and said that in that case she could leave. The young man looked at her and said that that's not the point. Eran looked at her and asked if she didn't want him to lie down with her. She was very embarrassed as he was very close to her. She looked at him, embarrassed, and said that in general she didn't mind. The young man looked at her intently as he was surprised. Averting her eyes, she said that she would like to avoid being touched. He looked at the young lady and told her to go to bed. He was puzzled by her words. Woke up, she saw that where he was sitting was empty. She didn't know where he went. The young lady went further into bed. Kona didn't know where he had gone, but still, in turn, I was worried about him. Turning over, she noticed that he was lying next to her. Kona was very surprised, and her sleep suddenly disappeared. Since she arrived at the estate, this was the first time he slept next to her. She was glad that he was next to her. She desperately wanted to touch him. To her surprise, he woke up and asked with a smile if she slept well. She was in shock and could not answer his question. Kona didn't expect him to wake up at such a moment. He looked at her and asked if he could touch her. The young lady was surprised. He said she recently said she wanted to avoid being touched. She looked at him and said it was okay, and he didn't have to ask if he just wanted to touch her cheek. Eran looked at her and said that he was very happy. Looking at the young lady, Eran asked what about the kiss. Kona was very confused by this question. She said she wouldn't refuse, but she still felt that touching would be more appropriate. He said he wouldn't touch her without her consent. Smiling, he said that she should know one thing, that the kiss would be no less long. He kissed her with tenderness and passion. She knew that the author was very mistaken, since the young man was delightful, not only in bed. Kona was shocked because the author did not mention that the young man was also an amazing kisser. She enjoyed his kiss and body. After their passionate kiss, she fell asleep. And after I woke up, I noticed that the young man had left. She, in turn, was a little upset that he was not around. She was very embarrassed as she had an incredibly long kiss, but she really liked him. She knew that she needed to stop thinking about it, and it was time to think about how to proceed. Kona knew that the most important thing was to change the plot, namely the events that would happen a week before the test results became known. The next day after the incident, the heroine will bleed, and it turns out that she is not pregnant. Then she said that she was not carrying a child under her heart, so she asked the young man to let her go immediately. He looked at her and said that he could not do this and also asked her to stay next to him. Kona was shocked and confused, as she didn't understand why the Duke would cling to someone like her. He looked at her and asked if she was asking, then that they really didn't know. Eran looked at her and said that she was the first girl he wanted to kiss. He also said that he really wants her to become the last. He was sincere in his feelings. She knew that this would be followed by a hot night, which would result in pregnancy. And in the next episode, the villains who set up the incident managed to drive the heroine out. And everything went according to the villain's plan. But Kona didn't want this at all, and she knew that she had to do something. She knew that she had in stock a promise to ask Eran, then she could use it at this moment. Kona hoped for his understanding and feelings. He looked at her and asked if she remembered that from today on, he was teaching her etiquette. The young man offered her something to eat in order to better understand all the subtleties of etiquette. Eran thought that with practice, she would understand the etiquette more clearly. He looked at her and said that he himself would teach her the rules of behavior. The young lady obediently agreed with him, but in turn, I understood that it would not be easy. The maid slowly brought in a dish for the meal. Kona looked intently at the maid, as there were a lot of dishes. The young lady was surprised because she noticed the excellent dish. She had never seen anything like this before. Eran looked at her and said that he would show her by example, so I suggested we try it together. After several unsuccessful attempts, Kona looked from growing to a delicious dish. She was shocked because the maid was carrying another dish. Kona thought that most likely the cart was magical, since there was a huge variety of dishes there, and this really scared her. She was shocked, since this was the 6th time she had failed to start the meal correctly. This upset her very much and frightened her, and she was also ashamed in front of Eran for her behavior. She was puzzled and wanted it to end quickly. Since she had already eaten 11 servings of one dish, she couldn't even look at the other dishes. She didn't understand why dinner etiquette was so difficult for her. The young man looked at his beloved, puzzled. Eran knew that she was already tired, and he knew that he had exhausted her greatly by mastering dinner etiquette. But he couldn't do anything about it, because he knew that she needed to be taught. He looked at her and said that today was the first day, so the feeling was even more painful. The young lady knew this, and was completely exhausted and exhausted. It was difficult for her to master all the subtleties of etiquette. Eran looked at her and said that he really hoped that tomorrow they would be able to get to the main course. Kona was furious as he fed her 11 plates of the same food. Kona thought he was just making fun of her. She looked at him and asked if it was okay that he finished his meal there. She said he never ate anything except a small piece that he used for demonstration. Address him, Kona called him master. Eran corrected her and said that she would have to answer for every time she calls him by a name other than his. The young lady was puzzled, because she was tired of it. Kona looked at him and said that she understood everything. She didn't know what was happening, because to herself she continued to call him by name. Kona knew that it was all because of the habits that remained in the memories of the past. The young man looked at her and said that in any case it seemed to him that it would not be easy to retrain her. Therefore, in order for her to learn faster, he came up with something. He came closer to her and said that from now on, whenever Kona makes a mistake, she will contact him as before. Then he will kiss her. The young lady was shocked by this statement. Kona didn't expect him to act like this. He said that of course Kona may not want to do this because it may seem that his actions are not fair. Therefore, he himself will kiss her. She looked at him and asked if he would do this if she said that she was against it. Eran looked at her and said that he thought everything depended only on her behavior, but for now, he would have to remind her of the right decision. The young man came closer to her, leaning towards her face. He told her to call him by name. The young lady stepped away from him and said that she was not very scared. Eran looked at her and said that this meant that it would not be possible to avoid their agreements. He liked this kind of punishment for his beloved. He looked at her and said that no matter what, he would continue to kiss her until she started calling him by name. With a sly smile, Eran said that maybe she would want something more. She had many opportunities to kiss her beloved as much as she wanted, but she knew that she couldn't do this, and it was a very cruel punishment, because truly she desired him. After that, she provoked him to kiss 4 more times. The next day, he continuously taught her how to kiss her. She certainly made fewer mistakes, but she was still poor at etiquette. The next day, Kona ate 8 plates of one dish, and the young man only became stricter. Even criticizing the speed of chewing, Kona felt like cattle eating without stopping. She felt uncomfortable and hard. Eran looked at her and said that she was learning much slower than he expected. The young lady was shocked and could not answer him. She was very ashamed of herself and her skills. He looked at her and said that it seemed to him that by today she had already learned everything she needed. The young lady thought that most likely there was something wrong with his method. Kona knew that before she fully mastered etiquette, she would cease to distinguish between tastes and her insides would refuse everything. Kona thought that, most likely tomorrow, she would have to eat a huge number of plates of the next dish. Having fallen asleep, she saw her assistant. He was very glad that she came. He looked at her and asked how her week in the new world had been. The young lady was very tired and did not want to talk about it. Kona could not withstand the load of Eran, and it was very difficult for her to master etiquette. She grabbed him by the ears and pulled him closer to her. He looked at her with a questioning look, because I didn't understand what this sudden impulse was. In a tired and trembling voice, she asked him to save her, since Eran was simply trying to destroy her. She looked at him and asked if he had come to her to give her a gift. He said that she understood everything correctly. Since the weekly day of exchange between dimensions has arrived, he was very glad that he could give her a fragment of the memory of the former heroine. He immediately wanted to start this, namely to show her the recommended memory of the young lady's personal relationships. Kona was a little puzzled as she was expecting something more worthwhile. She looked at him and asked if she understood correctly that the young lady had memories of etiquette. He looked at her and said that there was nothing new, because the girl was a commoner who was abandoned immediately after birth. She was puzzled by his answer, and said that in that case, she did not need anything else. Her assistant was shocked by her answer of the young lady. He expected her to gladly accept any gift. She looked at him puzzled, and said that she wouldn't be able to cram 10 plates of the same food into herself again tomorrow. She said she wouldn't mind if he gave her etiquette knowledge as a gift. Kona hoped for his understanding and condescension. He looked at her and said with a smile that she couldn't choose a gift on her own. He said that of the options, he had something else. Kona was puzzled and shouted that she didn't need anything other than etiquette. Kona screamed that her mouth and stomach were suffering endlessly and that precious time with her loved one had turned into torture. She shouted that she was very dissatisfied. But if we talk about memories, like last time, Kona will have to follow his instructions that she should learn something. He smiled at her and said that she was still smarter than she seemed. He looked at her and said with a smile that nothing of the kind was originally intended. But at his discretion, she could be given a special favor. The young lady was surprised and very happy. He looked at her and told her to keep in mind that such concessions were not often granted. He also asked her not to forget that initially there was nothing like this in the list of gifts, which means the price would be high. She looked at him and said that of course she would never forget his kindness and called him a sacred being. He exhaled heavily and said that this was not true at all. He looked at her and said mint chocolate. The young lady was puzzled and did not understand what he was talking about. She was surprised and did not understand what chocolate had to do with it. He looked at her and said that from now on, when she answers him, she needs to add mint chocolate. The girl was sincerely surprised by this statement. The young lady of the ball is confused. Kona looked at him and asked if she understood correctly that this was really his name. He looked at her and said that she understood everything correctly, and his name is Mint Chocolate. Her assistant gave her a book and began to tell her everything, little by little. His classes were different from those taught by Eran. A week later, she became acquainted with dining etiquette, which was no longer torture for her. Her assistant was very happy, as she coped with her duties perfectly. The servants, as well as the young master himself, looked at the young lady intently and in surprise. Eran looked at her and said that her skills in learning dining etiquette had grown significantly overnight. The young lady looked at him and thanked him for the compliment, but she herself knew that she had to endure a lot of suffering before learning this. He said that at first it seemed like her perception was slow, but the skill gradually improved. He said he felt like Kona could skyrocket his skills overnight. He said her dining etiquette needed no comment and they could complete the training tomorrow. He was very happy that he could teach her so quickly and perfectly. She smiled and said that he had worked hard to teach her all the finer points of etiquette. Eran looked at her and said that it also took her a lot of effort to learn the rules. Eran said he was right in thinking that repeating the same dish over and over again was a great trick for learning etiquette. She thought she would feel more comfortable by learning etiquette. But after that, she began to be occupied with other things, and Kona was not at all happy with this. Choosing clothes, learning how to leave in heels turned the time before the meeting into a nightmare. And then the day came for the garden party. She was waiting. The young man looked closely at his companion and asked if she was ready to go out. She noticed that a cropped jacket that stopped at the waist looked much cooler than a long one. Kona didn't know why clothes of any style suited him. He looked at her and said that the new dress suits her very well. Eran couldn't take his eyes off her. Kona smiled and thanked him for the compliment. She was pleased that he paid close attention to her. He looked at her and said with a smile that it was just a pity that the dress was more revealing than he expected. The lady was embarrassed for a moment. Kona was shocked and did not understand what to answer him. Kona knew that he behaved just like the main characters in the novel and not like a minor one. Eran looked at her and said that she had nothing to worry about. He wanted her not to worry and to have a pleasant day. He said that she just needed to think that this was an event where she had the opportunity to meet members of his family. She knew that she was perfectly prepared and there would be no mistakes on her part. Kona was looking forward to the start of the reception. As soon as they went into the garden, a young man approached them. He greeted his master and said that he should have come early to be able to meet him, and he also asked if the master could introduce the young lady who was next to him. The young man introduced his companion. The man smiled and said that it seemed like this was the girl the gentleman was rumored to be interested in. The man, according to rumors, already knew plenty of information about the young lady. The man said that he was very pleased to meet her. His father watched everything that happened. He stood nearby and watched them intently, without taking his eyes off. The young people heard and saw Ralph Volta approach them. Ralph looked at them and said with a smile that they had come after all, and he also noticed that the young lady was acting as his son's companion. The young lady looked at him and thanked him for the invitation. Ralph looked at his son and asked why they arrived at the event earlier than expected. The young man said that he wanted to give the young lady time to get to know their family. Ralph looked at his son and said that they really could become one family. So the more friends she has, the better. He looked at his son and said that he would like to talk to him about something. He also asked Kona if he could take Ertan for a couple of minutes. The young man was confused because he did not want to leave the young lady alone. Kona smiled and said that everything was fine and he could go without worrying about her. Kona knew she could do without him. He looked at her and said that in that case he would talk to his father and immediately return to her. Ertan did not want to leave his beloved for a minute, but he had no choice. The young lady heard someone greet her. Eileen Velsita greeted Kona. She said that she had heard a lot about her, so that she was very glad to meet her. The young lady said that she was also very glad to meet you and thanked her for speaking to her first. Kona said her companion moved away for a while and she was a little scared. Eileen looked at her and asked, "Why don't she sit with them then?" She said they were the same age, so they should be comfortable talking to each other. Kona smiled and said that it should rather be a request on her part. Kona thanked Eileen for her support. Eileen looked at her and asked if she could ask. She had something she was curious about. Kona smiled and said that, of course, she would not hesitate to ask anything. One of the young ladies said that she really likes that Kona lives freely. She looked at her and asked if I wouldn't say that Kona was just like that, or if it was just her character. They frantically asked her to tell how she met the head of their family. They knew that the young man was famous for not being interested in girls, so they were very curious about how they met and spent the whole night together. The young lady smiled and said that it is not often that you find a member of the clan dating a commoner. She wanted to piss Kona off and get to the bottom of the truth. Kona was shocked by their arrogant statements. Kona did not expect this from young and pleasant ladies. The young lady looked at her and asked for forgiveness as the words came out on their own. But still, she wanted to hear the truth from Kona, no matter what it costs her. The young lady smiled and told Kona not to be upset about it. Kona said that they accidentally ran into the gentleman during a masquerade ball. Someone present said that there was a masquerade. It was very romantic. The young lady, sipping tea, said that as far as she knew, this event was not so romantic. She said that as far as she heard, there was an atmosphere of general pleasure there. And they said that she often becomes the cause of promiscuity. She also said that there was one lady whose marriage broke up after 2 months because she attended a masquerade ball and an unpleasant incident happened there. The young lady was shocked by everything that had befallen her. The young Iceman furiously discussed the situation that had occurred at the masquerade ball and the ruined marriage of one noble lady. The lady looked at all the companions and said that all the unpleasant incidents happened because of the love potion. The young ladies were shocked and did not understand how someone could mix in a drug that could have a detrimental effect on people. They didn't believe that this was really the case. One of the young ladies said that it was best to ask Kona and get reliable information. The young lady looked at her and asked if she was right about the drug, since Kona was in the center of things. The young lady looked at her and asked how it was, and it really wasn't that she drank a love potion mixed with alcohol. Kona looked at them and said in a trembling voice that it was her first time at a masquerade ball. One lady said that she probably didn't remember anything and was also asked if she had been drinking there. One of the ladies asked if she had drunk alcohol before meeting the gentleman and how she felt when she drank. Since they were interested in whether she was under the influence of alcohol, their conversation was overheard by the young master. One lady asked if she understood correctly that Mr. drank her drink. Young Kona looked at them and said that it was all true. The young lady looked at her and said with a grin that everything sounded quite strange, and she had the feeling that something did not add up in the story being told. She looked closely at her and asked why the head of the family would drink her alcohol, since it was not a new drink, but an already started one. The young lady was desperate to hear the truth from Kona. She looked at her and asked with a grin if she herself had offered him a drink. She said that as soon as she found out that some commoner had attended the masquerade, she immediately became curious. Looking at the young lady, she said that she was very interested in whether she had gone to the masquerade ball for some specific purpose. Young Kona looked at her intently and asked what her words about a certain goal meant. She said that the main purpose of attending a party where only aristocrats gather is to find the right person and start communicating with him. Of those gathered for the event should have already guessed everything. She said that she knew that the young lady acted this way for a reason, since a commoner does not have many options for survival. She wanted to bring Kona into the open and show everyone her true colors. She said that it seemed to her that the only reasonable goal and solution to the problem was to try to raise her status at the expense of a man. She said that in this case, the young lady's goal was to conceive a child. The clan, close to perfection, has been faced with infertility since ancient times. She said with a grin that she didn't even know if she would succeed or not. Eileen called the young lady, who was throwing questions and reproaches at Kona. She was very worried and afraid. The young lady looked at Eileen in bewilderment as she did not understand why she was trembling in fear. Eran approached them. He looked at his companion and said that she had won the argument, because I found myself in an unpleasant situation again. The young lady was shocked, as she did not expect to see the gentleman behind her. He looked at them and said that she was in such a situation because of him, and it was his mistake. The ladies present were shocked and did not know what to do. After he approached them, the music stopped. Everyone watched his actions closely and did not know what to do. And is it worth continuing the event? The young lady stood up and greeted the young master and introduced herself with a trembling voice. Eran approached his companion and asked her to stand up, since he did not intend to linger any longer. The young lady looked at the gentleman and said in a trembling voice that there had been a slight misunderstanding, and she did not mean anything like that at all. Without looking at her, he said that everything needed to be cleared up right now. He looked at everyone gathered and said that the night they spent together was initiated by him, and the fact that she was now in their possession was also entirely his responsibility. He said that by insulting her in this way, they were insulting his will and the decision he had made. The young man called his companion. She called him in a trembling voice, calling him master. He looked at her and asked if she had forgotten that he told her not to add honorific prefixes to his name. He said she had made a mistake again and should be punished. Everyone present was shocked by this behavior of their master. They didn't expect something like this from him. The young man kissed her tenderly. The young lady was embarrassed, and in turn, shocked. Kona didn't think at all that he was capable of kissing her in front of everyone present. She was shocked and confused as everyone was looking at them. The young man looked at the young lady who was insulting his companion and said that today she was deprived of the right to visit the Velsita Palace. He also said that together with her family, they would raise the issue of depriving her of her status as an aristocrat. The young lady was shocked by the behavior of the head. She didn't expect this. She fell to her knees in front of them. She frantically begged him for forgiveness. This release of the power of the spirit powerfully brings him closer to perfection. The young man looked at his father and said that they would return back, and also asked to see the guests off. His father said in a trembling voice that he would do anything. Mission winning at the garden party accomplished. It's time to rethink what's going on. The young assistant was very glad that the mission was accomplished, and in just a week, she had improved dining etiquette. Mint Chocolate was very pleased and happily said that it was good. Peppermint Chocolate looked at her and said that he had determined the price of the gift he had given her. He said that the mission of victory at the garden party is completed, and there will be a villainess at the garden party who will press on her. He said that she needed to properly cool her ardor with his triumph. The reason she mentioned the masquerade ball was because she needed to give them a reason to attack. It was a ploy to keep them above her. She was very happy and couldn't help but smile. Kona wanted to smile from ear to ear as her plan was a success. The young man looked at her and said that he was not prudent enough. He said that he put pressure on everyone who was at the family meeting and did not think that anyone would go against it. Eran looked at her and asked what she would like right now. Eran said it was not a request to talk about, and he would like to truly know what she wants right now. She realized that there was no need to use the request. She knew that she could control Marinelle's fate at her own discretion. She really wanted to punish her and give her what she deserved. She remembered Marinelle saying that everything was very strange, and she had the feeling that something didn't add up in the story being told. She wanted to know the main purpose of attending the party. Kona knew that in a way, the girl was right. She knew that she suffered only to carry out the plan. But if you think about a real heroine, this would really hurt her. She couldn't get rid of the unpleasant feeling. The young lady looked at her lover and said in a trembling voice that she wanted to tell him something. A moment later, she told him everything. He looked at her and asked if she really wanted this. She said she would really like to. Eran looked at her and said that since he asked her about her wish, he was simply obliged to fulfill her will. She looked at him and thanked him for his understanding and support. He looked at her and said that, however, if someone insults her, she does not need to think about anything and continue to build her insidious plans. Eran said that he would have to deal with them himself. On the way to the room, her aunt called out to her. The woman wanted to talk to Kona after an unpleasant incident. Kona was surprised because she didn't expect to see her. Her new aunt looked at her and said that she heard about what happened at the garden party. She said that she was very worried about her. That's why she came. The young lady was a little puzzled that her aunt had heard everything about her. The woman looked at her and asked if she was okay. Aunt wanted to listen and help Kona. The young lady smiled and said she was fine, and in fact, she expected something like this. She said that Marinelle's words were partly true, since she is only a commoner. She remembered the young lady saying that she thought the only sensible thing to do was to try to raise her status at the expense of a man. The young lady, looking away, said that it is not surprising that people perceive everything this way. She, of course, expected this, but did not think that they would treat her with such anger and hatred. Her aunt began to calm her down and said that many more disappointments awaited her. She said that she heard that the head of the family took care of her properly and punished all the offenders. She said that Eran is very worried about Kona, which means there is no need to worry about anything. She told the young lady not to worry and to take care of herself, since she could carry the head of the clan under her heart. The young lady smiled and thanked her aunt, saying that she was right about everything. The woman looked at her and said that she had something for her. Young Kona was at a loss. She looked at her and said that she would like to give her some bubble bath from Largo's workshop, and advised her to use it while taking a bath, since today she was very physically and mentally tired. The young lady thanked her aunt. The woman looked at her and said that in a few days she would have to take a pregnancy test and the result would be positive, so she needed to strengthen herself. The young lady was a little surprised by her words, but she still thanked her aunt. She was intently studying magic, but she was already a little tired. Kona knew that even if she received the memory of the previous owner of the body about magic, she did not know whether creating a magic circle would be the limit of her ability. She knew that she would soon be able to obtain a book of magical recipes from her former home. A moment later, Kona saw a box on the table. Kona remembered the gift and thought it was time for her to take a bath. While taking a bath, Kona noticed that the aroma from the foam was very pleasant. The maid smiled and said that she had correctly noticed that the aroma of lemon is refreshing and helps you feel better. The young lady looked at the maid and asked how long she had been taking her bath. The maid said that about 20 minutes had already passed. The young lady said that she should nevertheless finish her bath, as she was feeling dizzy. The maid saw the exhausted appearance of the young mistress and asked what was hurting her. The young lady looked at her and said that her stomach hurt a little. The maid, surprised and frightened, asked if she should call the doctor. The young lady said that it was not worth it, and that she would just rest. She looked at the maid and said that she should just sleep, and everything would pass, so she has nothing to worry about. After some time, the maid came to the mistress's chambers and brought her tea and snacks, but saw that the young mistress was nowhere to be found. A moment later, she heard her mistress's voice and was surprised. She was very scared. The maid saw the mistress sitting on the floor and trembling. The maid was very scared and asked what happened. Eran flew into the room with lightning speed. He was frightened by his beloved's condition. The young lady looked at him as she was surprised that he had come. He said he was told that she was bleeding. The young man asked whether this was true or not. She said she might be menstruating or might be bleeding, and she doesn't even know. Eran came closer to her and asked if she was feeling okay. The young lady, puzzled, said that she was not in much pain, but in reality, Kona felt sick. He looked at her and said that he would call the doctor. The young lady looked at him and said that it was just her period and there was no need to call a doctor. The young man was puzzled and said that he insisted that she be checked by a doctor and told whether this was normal menstruation or not. She looked at him and said that she didn't care if it was her period or not. He was a little surprised and dumbfounded. She looked at him and said that the whole truth was that she was not pregnant. He said in a menacing voice, "No way." Kona was a little surprised and didn't understand what he was saying. Eran looked at her as he approached and said that she would never leave him. The young man was scared and dumbfounded. He said that he could never let her go. The young lady was surprised by such a statement. He looked at her and said that he would immediately call a doctor. He asked her to follow his recommendations, and he also said that he thought it would be better for her to rest today. The young lady would like to answer him something, but he said that most likely he would not come to her for a while as he was very busy at work. Kona was surprised and did not understand why he began to avoid her so suddenly. She did not at all expect such a reaction from him. She thought that soon he was going to send her away. Eran said that if she needed anything, she could contact the maid at any time, and with lightning speed, he rushed out of the room. Kona shouted after him because she wanted to talk to him. She didn't want to ask him to let her out, but she didn't want him to call the doctor, since she herself was pretending to be sick. The young lady stared at the bubble bath. She enjoyed the smell. It was familiar to her. The young lady wanted to know the composition of the foam, as she felt familiar aromas. She gazed at all the familiar jars with their contents. Having found what she needed, she was very happy. A week before the test results were announced, the villains mixed an abortifacient into the bath salts. After taking a bath, the young lady started bleeding. Fortunately, the young lady was not pregnant at that time, and although it did not happen that Kona lost the child, it was still unpleasant. The more she thought about it, the more irritated she became. She thought she should take a salt bath that would change everything. Kona knew she had to follow the rules. The young lady called the maid and said that she would like dessert. She also looked at the maid and asked if she could bring her some medicine. Ko, who could not use magic properly, developed a couple of small spells. One of them is the content of 1 drop of blood. And for this, the spell is enough. Kona spells and high-grade ingredients that the maid prepared, and it is quite enough to imitate the symptoms of the disease. The young lady did everything right and she got an excellent result. She was very glad that she could avoid unexpected consequences and prevent a disaster. After which her performance began. She called the maid. The southern woman was shocked to see her on the floor in poor condition. Although Eran insisted that she be examined by a doctor, he simply prescribed medicine and left, saying that she needed to be monitored further. She was very glad that the doctor was a man, since he could not conduct a detailed examination, and she was very grateful to fate for such a pleasant gift. So far, everything was going according to her plan. Later, at a pregnancy meeting, Eran will tell her haters that he is letting her go due to a miscarriage. But the relationship will continue after the miscarriage, and the possibility of pregnancy will remain. However, after this, the already cool relationship with the family will become even worse. She knew that she would have to cope without Eran's help where possible. Kona was sure that she would have a child, but it was too early for that. Although there are many reasons, she would like to remain in the status of newlyweds longer. She didn't want to feel all the inconveniences associated with pregnancy, and she was very scared to give birth. She knew what problems awaited her in the future, so she did not want to rush. The biggest reason for his fear was Rebecca, to whom his childhood friend from a noble family was engaged. She was the most eligible bride in the country, but in reality, she would do anything to recapture Eran and was the main villain. A young lady who grew up in an orphanage really wanted a child who would become her family. She decided not to return home and do everything to give the child the best. However, in the 5th month of pregnancy, she lost her child. This loss traumatized her greatly. Because of this, Kona and Eran distanced themselves from each other. Kona knew that she could at least prevent the events of the original. The problem is that she doesn't know what tricks the villains will resort to later. She knew that she needed to reconsider what cards she had in her hands before the meeting began. Be that as it may, she did not want to leave her new family at all. The maid looked at the mistress and said that the magician had come to conduct a pregnancy test. She was a little surprised, since a whole month had already passed since the first time. The young magician looked at her and asked her to make herself comfortable, as he wanted to immediately begin the verification process. But in turn, he was polite and courteous to Kona. The magician began checking. The young lady tearfully begged the respected author not to make her pregnant. Kona resorted to magic to stop the bleeding. Kona knew there would be a lot of problems if she turned out to be pregnant. The young mage looked at her and said that there was a result. His appearance was very gloomy. She looked at him and asked what the result was. The young man calmly called the magician and said that he would like to go away with him for a minute. They talked about something for several minutes. At the end of the conversation, Eran said that everything was clear to him and the magician could go. The young lady looked at her lover and asked what the test result was. Looking away, he said that the magician did not feel the energy in her womb. The young lady was a little dumbfounded and said that she understood everything. She said in a trembling voice that she knew that everything would be like this, but in her heart she was very happy. She was sincerely glad that everything went according to her plan. As he left her, he told her to stay in bed until she felt better. Kona was shocked by the young man's behavior and asked him to stop. She frantically wanted to talk to him, but the young man was not in the mood for conversation. Without looking at her, Eran said that they would talk about everything later, and now he has things to do, and with lightning speed he left the room. The young lady was dumbfounded by this behavior. She was shocked because she herself wanted to stay on the estate. Kona didn't understand why he couldn't find the right words to talk to her. She was shocked and very angry because she was going crazy because she couldn't understand his facial expression correctly lately. She was furious about what was happening because of the misunderstanding. Kona decided that every time he pissed her off, she would pretend that she wanted to leave the estate. After everything that happened, Kona was fast asleep. When she woke up, she saw her new friend. He smiled at her and said that he was very glad to see her, since they had not seen each other for a long time. She was a little shocked and did not understand why this something was lying under the same blanket with her. She didn't want to be in the same bed with him at all, because she wanted Eran to warm her bed. She looked at him and greeted him, calling him by name. He was happy and said that after the third time she got used to him. He looked at her and said that before she seemed rude and ignorant, and now it is gradually starting to change. He looked at her and asked if she was ready to begin today's leadership. Her assistant looked at her in surprise and asked what was wrong with her facial expression and gestures. Kona looked at him and told him to just start explaining faster. He said that first of all they needed to talk about the benefits and showed her the mission calculation table. Kona was surprised because she didn't expect to see this. He said that in order to get certain benefits, you need to pay a price, that is, complete a mission. Missions can be divided into regular missions, in which the rewards end after achieving the goal, and special missions in which additional credits are made even after the goal is achieved. He smiled and said that she needed to earn points for special missions and get a lot of benefits. He looked at her and said that she currently had 85 points, and she can exchange them. She noticed that there was a gift for the assistant on the list. Kona looked at him and said that there was one useless item on the list. He looked at her puzzled and said that there was nothing like that. He looked at her and said with a smile, "Look at the third point for her. This is that she rejected the last time the memories of the relationship, the past owner of the body." He told her that the task would be to visit her former home. Namely, he needed to come to her house and take the necessary things. She knew that the task was not difficult since she was going there anyway. However, I was a little puzzled. She didn't know if it made sense to remember Kona's attitude, since she had a general idea of relationships while reading the novel. Kona looked at him and said that she would exchange her points for special privileges. He smiled and said she made a brave choice. He said with a smile that in this case she just needs to pull out the ball. Her assistant was anticipating the moment of truth. He was wondering what she could win. The young lady took one ball out of the box. He smiled and said that she had caught the beginner's luck. She was surprised and asked what she got. He said that she had received the privilege of receiving bonuses whenever she wanted them. He said that with the advantage he had just chosen, Kona could enter the dream world even if it was not the day of advantage. The young lady was a little dumbfounded. He also said that her special bonus ticket will now be engraved on her body. He said that she just needed to touch the place where the engraving was and think about how she wanted to take advantage of the bonuses. He looked at her and told her not to worry because others wouldn't see. Kona knew that in the end she still didn't receive bonuses that would have helped right away. He looked at her with a smile and asked, since she had already received bonuses, why don't she check the assignments? She knew that this bonus still had its advantages. After a moment, they said goodbye. The young lady noticed that Eran had arrived. In turn, Kona did not expect him to come to her. She was surprised because she did not expect to see him, since he had been avoiding her lately. He looked at her and with a puzzled look said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and that's why he came. Eran also said that an emergency meeting was scheduled for tomorrow, and he did not know that all this would happen behind his back. She looked at him and asked if, in that case, she also needed to be there. He looked away, puzzled, and said that of course she needed to be there, but she had nothing to worry about since he would take care of everything. He also said that, on the other hand, he would prefer to keep her away from all this. Kona looked at him with surprised eyes. He asked why she didn't like being on the estate. Kona was a little surprised by this question. He looked at her and asked if she was uncomfortable in the estate because this place was different from where she used to live, or if she was just tired of the constant insults. The young lady was confused. She said that's not true at all. He looked at her and sadly asked if maybe she hated him. The young lady was dumbfounded by such a question. Kona didn't understand why he had such thoughts. She was puzzled and did not understand how she could hate him at all, since he even conquered the heroine in the original. She was grateful to the writer and parents who created him this way. Kona looked at him intently as she could not take her eyes off such a charming and attractive young man. She looked at him and asked if she said yes, then he would let her go. He was shocked by this answer. The young man looked at his beloved in puzzlement. Eran could not say a word. She caused him unbearable pain with such words. She knew that she would continue to pretend in the future that she wanted to leave the estate. She wanted to teach him a lesson because he behaved wrongly with her. He looked at her and said that apparently she hated him very much. She looked at him sideways and said that everything was wrong. She said she just wanted to know if he would let her go. Eran was perplexed. He said, gritting his teeth, that they would find out the answer to this question tomorrow at the meeting. He looked at her intently and in a trembling voice said that they needed to go. She knew she had 20 years of experience under her belt, so she could test her acting skills. Kona knew that they were all planning an evil plan behind Eran's back. They were genuinely afraid that he would show up at the meeting. She knew that all those gathered were just idiots, since they just needed to look for a place where they could lie down and stretch their legs and not create a booth. Eran's father looked at everyone and said that they could begin the meeting, since at the last meeting it was announced that the young lady might be pregnant with an heir. Looking at the young people, he said that this was the reason why permission to marry had been requested. Eran stared at his father, and the atmosphere was very gloomy. Eran's father said that evidence had been received that the girl was not pregnant, and they decided to defer the decision until the result of the examination, as they needed to conduct the examination again. So a place was allocated for a new meeting. Eran watched everyone closely and attentively. He looked at them and said that obviously after the pregnancy test, it would be appropriate to find a new meeting place. The men present supported him, and the man also said that in the end, they were confident that feelings would not cloud the wisdom of the family's head. Eran looked at them and said that, however, proof had been received that she was not pregnant. This was the part that worried him most. He looked at them and asked how they knew that he had proof that she was not pregnant, because he himself knew that no one really knew the result of the test. The young lady looked at her lover and realized that he was more far-sighted than she thought. This made her very happy because she knew that not everything was lost. Eran ordered the magician and the maids to remain silent. He knew they wouldn't tell anyone the test results because they knew better than to anger him. What was happening now can only mean that there was a conspiracy after all, and they managed to obtain information. But Kona was also sure that they were sure that she had bled to death and lost the baby. One man said that they heard the maids talking while they were doing laundry, and he also asked the head of the family not to get too angry. Eran looked at him sideways and said that it would be necessary to conduct an investigation, since, according to the Lord, the maids were to blame for everything. So they need to be found and punished. The Lord was shocked because he did not expect this. He thought that Erdi would believe him and would not look for the culprits. The young man looked at everyone gathered and said that they needed to return to the topic of their meeting, and he also asked what the other council members thought about this. One young man said that if his beloved does not bear an heir, then it will be difficult for them to accept her as a mistress. Eran's father looked at him and said that Elgin also noticed that Kona was unworthy of being on the estate. He said that she was amazingly perceptive, and the head should not let her into the house. They all shouted that they agreed with the conclusion of Father Eran, since neither her origin nor her achievements were unworthy of their family. They said that everything needed to be returned to normal and the old plan abandoned. Then another proposal should be put to a vote. The young lady was confused and in shock. She didn't know if she should now come forward and say a word. Eran stood up menacingly and said that he had heard enough, and now he wanted to tell them his point of view. Smiling, he said that if the young lady is not pregnant, then it is not a problem. He looked at them and asked with a smile if they couldn't take care of this issue today. Everyone present was stunned by the young man's behavior. They did not expect this from the head of an illustrious family. The young lady was also surprised and shocked by this statement. Kona didn't understand why he said that, and why he didn't take her opinion into account. He looked at her and said that she should have a good dinner today. Kona was shocked but also a little embarrassed. He looked at her and said in a gentle voice that tonight would be a very long night. The young man grabbed her hand and walked into the room with lightning speed. Kona was shocked and asked him to stop. He looked sideways at her and said that this was the answer to her question. The young man smiled and said that he was not going to let her go. Kona was shocked, as she realized that it was entirely her fault, as she had overlooked the changes in Ertain's behavior. She, of course, knew that he was crazy, but she didn't know to that extent. She was genuinely surprised and also fascinated by him. Kona knew he was just crazy. He looked at her and asked what she was thinking about so much. He also said that it seemed like she didn't take his words at the meeting seriously. Kona was surprised. He looked at her and asked with a smile if it was time for them to really address the child's issue. The young lady was stunned and only answered him in a trembling voice, something incomprehensible. He pulled her closer to him and said that in this case, she should understand what would happen next. The young lady was taken aback by the young man's behavior and looked at him in confusion. A moment later, he kissed her with tenderness and passion. In a fit of passion, the young lady said that she understood everything perfectly. After a passionate kiss, he looked at her and asked if she wanted him to do it again. After an awkward silence, he asked her if she wanted to go straight to bed. The young lady became embarrassed. She was shocked and excited by such a question. With lightning speed, he picked her up in his arms and carried her to bed. She was a little embarrassed and asked him to wait a little, because she was not ready, and everything did not go according to her plan. He looked at her with tender eyes and said that he had said that she needed to have a nice dinner, but after the kiss he thought that he should take back his words. He looked at her and said with a smile that it seemed she would miss lunch too. He frantically wanted to take possession of her body, and as quickly as possible. The young lady was shocked. She didn't understand how he could have such beautiful breasts. Kona thought she was probably made of steel. The young man tenderly touched her ear and whispered to her to relax. He wanted everything to go as it should. He said that perhaps today it would be much more pleasant for her than the first time. Ertain wanted to enjoy every centimeter of her body. The young man was enjoying his time with the young lady. She couldn't stand it and pushed him away. She knew that this could not be done since she could disrupt the entire plot with her behavior. She looked at him and said with a smile that they didn't have to do it for real. He said that it was no secret to anyone why they were together in the same room, and no one would be able to hear them. She said that's why I have to do it too. He looked at her in surprise and asked why he should refuse. Ertain asked her what if he just pretended. He said that if they were caught not being in a relationship, there would be more problems, and he would rather continue their relationship instead. But that's not all, because he desperately wanted her. He wanted to enjoy her company for a long time. She was shocked because she also wanted him madly. But Kona knew that if she did that, things wouldn't go according to her plan. And she, in turn, could not allow this. But still, she knew that if she became pregnant now, it was unknown what the attackers would do. She looked at him and said that he told her that she could ask him for anything. She looked at him and said that she wanted to ask him just this once, to pretend that everything had happened between them. He looked at her and asked if it was true that she wanted him to fulfill her request. He remembered that he told her recently that if she wants something, then she just needs to tell him about it, and he will do everything. The young man was a little puzzled, since he understood everything, but fought out of desire, because he really wanted her. He looked at her and said that there really was nothing to be done about it. However, it seemed to him that if he left now, it would be unwise. He looked at her and said that he would try to convince her. Ertain looked at her with a sly smile and said that he wanted to argue with her and see if she could hold out. She knew that this was where she should have said no, but she still didn't. The young lady looked at him puzzled. She knew that if it weren't for the risk of getting pregnant, they wouldn't sleep all night. The young lady was a little puzzled by everything that happened between them. All night and all morning her skin was chafed by the thin fabric of her clothes. She was tired of not being able to get rid of her, but still knew that Eran was probably worse off than she was now. He looked at her and said that for some time he thought that they would not be able to see each other since they needed time to deal with the current situation. She knew that only a few days had passed, and because of one incident, he almost lost his status as head of the clan. The young lady looked at him intently and agreed with his words. He looked at her and said that he was telling her this so that she would not invent anything unnecessary for herself. And he also told her not to try to escape from him. Eran said that he sees that she is avoiding a relationship with him, and he does not understand why. He was a little puzzled by everything that was happening, but there was nothing he could do about it. He said that if she still plans to leave the estate, then she better do it now. When leaving, he told her not to leave her room and not receive guests, and he also said that he had given instructions to the servants. Kona knew that using delusion was the best decision then. A handsome man who is even more obsessed with her because he is afraid that she will run away from him. She was even a little glad, because she was right in thinking that he was obsessed with her. Kona knew it was amazing of him. Sometime later, the young lady was happily soaking in the bathtub. She knew that nothing improves your mood like a warm bath. Kona wanted to put all her thoughts aside and relax a little. She knew there were a lot of twists and turns ahead, but she thought they handled them well. She knew that now she could put her thoughts in order a little. In the original, about a month after the test, it turned out that Kona was pregnant. But the family didn't really like Kona, and that worried her a little. Realizing this, Eran decides to get married. The young lady was puzzled. She did not know how to do this. He looked at her and said that there are several ways. After some time, he secretly entered into a marriage contract with her. She was pregnant and married. Now they could live happily ever after. It was like that for a while. But after his childhood friend heard that the young lady was pregnant and also that he got married, she was shocked. She wanted to get rid of Kona with all her might. Soon Eran told Rebecca about this, whom he considered his close friend, and thereby he made a fatal mistake. She looked at him and congratulated him on such an event. She said it was just wonderful news. She looked at Kona and congratulated her on such an event. However, she said that there was something she needed to tell her, but she didn't know if she should say it. Not wanting to give in, Rebecca came up with a devious plan to drive a wedge between the spouses. This was the case in the original version. But still, Kona wanted to change the original story because she didn't like everything. But for now, she tried to avoid intimacy with Eran so as not to get pregnant. The plot of the original was completely inverted and there were too many variables. The young lady didn't know what to do. The maid accidentally saw marks on the mistress's body. Kona was puzzled, asked her what was the matter. With a trembling voice, the maid said that it was nothing. The maid was taken aback and repeated several times that it was absolutely nothing. And everything is fine. The young lady was confused and did not understand the strange behavior of the maid. But still, she knew that showing the evidence to the maids was successfully completed, just as she wanted. She was glad that everything was going according to her plan. She knew she now had to figure out how to minimize the huge variables. Passing by the table, she saw a book of formulas for the magic circle. Kona was happy and knew this was what she needed. The young lady looked at the maid and she told her that the meeting ended so well, since the master admitted their mistake and will no longer violate the rules of the council. The young lady was very pleased with this turn of events and said that perhaps she would even be able to talk to the gentleman. Kona looked at the maid and asked if she could ask him if he could meet. The maid smiled and said that she would definitely ask him when she would see him. Kona thanked her. Kona knew that everything was going well, and she was very happy about it. She desperately wished Eran would let her go home for a while, as she needed to pick up something. She wanted to get him to let her out, despite all the obstacles. She desperately wanted to get the magic book that the previous owner of the body had, since she had a large book of spells. Kona, who lived in a province where prostitution flourished, invented several of her spells for sale. The original story didn't go into detail about what these spells were, but if you think about it, there is a high probability that there is something like contraception there. But she had a problem. First, she needs to go to the city to pick up the book, and there is an obsessed man who thinks that she will run away from him, given the opportunity. The problem was that she didn't know if he could let her go. But she also knew that the mission needed to be completed and bonuses collected. Her new assistant encouraged her every time and said that she would certainly cope with the task. Kona knew that no matter whether she succeeded in taking something away, she must go to her home. She knew that she would definitely succeed, since she had a rough plan. But although it was a difficult task, it was still doable. She knew that she had to do whatever it took to achieve her goal. The young lady slept quietly and peacefully at night. Eran watched intently as his lover slept quietly. He came closer to her and gently kissed her on the cheek. The young lady was surprised because she didn't expect anyone to come. Opening her eyes, she saw him. The young man was surprised that he woke her up. He asked for forgiveness because he did not want to do this. She looked at him and said it was okay. He said they were still supposed to meet tonight. He said he only stopped by for a minute. So he asked her to go to bed and continue to rest. Eran did not want to disturb her peace at all. After his words, she remembered how she spoke to the maid before going to bed. She said that the gentleman would come to her in the evening. Kona was excited and happy since they had not seen each other for a long time. She knew that since he came to her, she could talk to him. She looked at him because she wanted to tell him something. The young man said that he was listening to her carefully. She looked at him and said that it would be very nice if he allowed her to visit her old house. She said that she would go there and back, and would definitely come back, since she needed to pick up something. Eran puzzled and looked at her patiently. He looked at his beloved and said that he would tell one of the servants to bring what she needed. The young lady was puzzled. She said she didn't want her things to fall into the wrong hands. She did not intend to give up, and said that this thing was very important to her, and she was worried about it. Kona looked at him and asked if she couldn't go get her herself. He looked at her and didn't answer. But a moment later, looking away, he asked her what would happen if he said he didn't want to let her go. He sincerely didn't want her to leave him. She looked at him and said with tenderness that she would do anything he asked. Kona looked at him confusedly and said that she would definitely return and would not run away from him. The young man was surprised by these words. A moment later, he became embarrassed. He didn't expect her to say something like that. The young lady looked at him and said that she was ready for marriage or something more. Kona frantically begged him to let her go, as she was ready to do anything for him. He was dumbfounded by this statement. Kona looked at him and asked if he agreed. She hoped that he would understand her and allow her to go home. The young man was amazed by her words. He couldn't answer. But a moment later he said that he would keep his word. She was very happy, since she managed to persuade him. Kona knew that she was slowly approaching her goal. She looked at him and told him not to worry, and she could swear to him that she would not run away from him. He said that in a different situation he would have been very happy with her words. But however, now it was great, but he would be glad if it didn't happen. He knew that if she ran away from him, he might have to put shackles on her tender legs. Kona saw all his thoughts. She knew he was the picture of obsession and regret. Kona knew that she definitely had to buy him a good gift. He looked at her and said that last night he was too rude to her. He said that he would definitely talk to the servant tomorrow, and then they would discuss the details. He looked at her and said that with that, he took his leave. The young man slowly left her room. She looked at him as he left and called him out, and thanked him for listening to her request. The young man turned around and looked at her, puzzled. He said that there was nothing to thank him for. The young lady rode in a carriage in anticipation towards her cherished plan. The purpose of this trip is to pick up a book of spells and find a magic artifact to resolve the current situation and complete this task. Kona told him then that she would return as soon as she took everything she needed. She knew that she had promised him, but she still really wanted to have some fun. She's been sitting in her room for a month. It's one thing when someone is obsessed with her and takes care of her, but this will soon cause mushrooms to grow on her body. The young man himself gave her a large sum of money. He said it was a gift from him, and also gave her an artifact that tracked her location. He looked at her and told her to definitely put it on. She thought that, most likely, in this way Eran gave the go-ahead for her to rest a little. Kona knew it would be nice to take a little walk. The young lady looked at the knight who rode with her and called him by his title. He looked at her and told her to call him Lord. She looked at him and said that on the way back home she wanted to look around a little and asked him if he would mind. He said that he did not mind, since the gentleman said that they could return in the evening. The young lady was very happy with this answer. The young man looked at her and said that it seemed they had arrived. The young lady stared at the door of her former home. She was puzzled by the view she saw, since the house was very old. Kona didn't understand how she could even live here. He looked at her and asked if they could go inside. The young lady looked at the knight and said that she could handle it herself since she only wanted to pick up a few books. Kona looked at him and asked if he could wait for her outside. He was not happy with such an offer and said that he should come in just in case. The young lady smiled and told him not to worry as she had a tracking artifact brooch. When she went inside, she saw that the door was open. The young lady was puzzled as she knew the door was supposed to be closed. Looking around the room, she saw many marks on the floor. And I was not very happy about this find. She thought that most likely they were thieves, but she also knew that this was not the case in the original, and this made her very alarmed. Looking around the room, she saw a magic book. She was glad that she was able to find it so quickly without making much effort. She was now grateful to this book, since she could find the necessary spell to prevent pregnancy. Looking at the book, Kona noticed something. She knew that in the original, Kona had definitely tied the edge of the book with her hair and secured it with magic. Looking at the book, Kona noticed that someone was opening it. She was at a loss and did not know who could open the book, and that worried her a little. Unexpectedly, someone crept up behind her. The man furiously threw her to the floor. He was glad that he was finally able to find her. He desperately wanted to deal with her. He looked at her and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. He also warned her not to twitch, otherwise he would break her neck. She was shocked, because she knew that this man who broke into her house was Jeffrey. He was very angry and indignant, and it scared her. Kona didn't know what to expect from him. He looked at her and said that because of her, he was now starving. He said that because of that man, his bones did not heal properly, and now he suffers from pain every day. He furiously wanted to take revenge on her and cause her the same pain that was caused to him. He said that he kept thinking about how to punish her for ruining his life, but fortunately, he was not the only one thinking about it. He said that many want to take revenge on her. He looked at her and said that she seemed to irritate a lot of people, but still, he was glad that he could find her first and take revenge. The young man said that she seemed to be having a good time with her new man lately. He smiled and said that he could correct her beauty as he was asked to do so. So that after his manipulations no one will recognize her? He looked at her and slyly said that he could better have fun with her now. She was in shock and understood that no one would help her. Kona resisted furiously and wanted to use magic, but nothing worked. He said that if her boyfriend found out that she had sex with someone else, he would immediately abandon her. The young lady was in shock as she couldn't even move. Kona knew she needed to focus on magical power. She wanted to throw him out of her body. He looked at her and said that he was looking forward to their intimacy. He was looking forward to the moment of reckoning. Suddenly, unexpectedly for her, someone hit Jeffrey, and the young man also asked her if she was injured. The young lady was shocked and confused, as she did not expect help from anyone. She gazed at the young man who had saved her a moment ago. In turn, she was very glad that someone saved her. She did not understand where he came from and looked at him intently. The young man looked at her intently and said that there was a cut on her beautiful face. He said the cut was shallow, so it will pass soon. Kona was shocked. She was surprised that she had a cut on her face, but she was also surprised and did not understand where the young man had suddenly appeared from. Jeffrey was furious and shouted at the young man. He didn't understand how he got into the house and how he dared to hit him. The young man, in turn, was not afraid of Jeffrey, who shouted at him. He knew that at any moment he could deal with him at will. He looked at him and asked the young man why he was here. The young man was surprised by this question and asked why the bastard couldn't be here. Jeffrey asked for his forgiveness, since he did not think that he would come here, and he frantically begged the young man to spare his life. The young man looked at him and said with a grin that he talked too much. The young lady thought that the young man had obviously cast a silencing spell. Kona was surprised and didn't understand that he was like that at all, and she was even more worried about why he helped her. The young lady looked at the young man and thanked him for saving her. She looked at him and asked if she understood correctly that he had completely suppressed Jeffrey. The young man looked at her and asked if she was worried about him. The young lady said that it was quite the opposite, since she furiously wants to take revenge on him, and for this she needs him to be unable to move. The young man smiled and said that it was not so difficult to do. The young lady was furious because Jeffrey had caused her a lot of pain. Kona wanted to take revenge on him. She slowly approached him to deal with him. The young man looked at her and said that she was more bloodthirsty than he thought. He was surprised, but at the same time he was even glad about this. The young lady looked at her savior and said that she wished she had done more. Kona said that in any case, thanks to him, she is alive. So she thanked him again for saving her. She looked at him and told him to forgive her, since she had been rude and did not know his name. The young man thought about his name for a moment. He looked at her and said with a sly smile that she could call him Jay. The young lady heard her knight outside the door shouting and calling her, as he was very worried about her. The young lady smiled and said that everything was fine and she would be leaving soon. The knight, in turn, was worried because he could not open the door because of the lock. The young man looked at her and said that it looked like she had a companion, and that meant it was time for him to leave. Kona was shocked that he was leaving like that, as she wanted to talk to him more. The young lady tried to stop him because she wanted to tell him something else. Jay looked at her and said that she didn't need to say anything, and he was very happy to help her. In parting, he said that he was very glad to meet her, and also asked her to be careful on the way back. Smiling, he jumped out of the window, calling her Madam Magician. She noticed that he used teleportation. The young lady was surprised by the fact that he called her a magician and that he helped her, but still she was grateful to him, since he appeared very opportunely. The young man rushed into the room and said that he was very sorry since he had to accompany her. The young lady was shocked, as she did not expect him to enter the house so rudely. The knight looked at her and asked where she got hurt. "Because I saw a scratch on her face." The young lady said that everything was fine and it was just a scratch. He said that they needed to return to the estate as soon as possible, since this was not a place where they could stay for long. The young lady obediently agreed with him. After the incident, she understood that they should leave her house as soon as possible so that this would not happen. She looked around her room intently, and she understood that her savior looked too suspicious. She thought it was all strange since he appeared at the moment when it was needed and saved her. But still, Kona did not understand how he realized that she was a magician. She knew that this was not in canon, and it puzzled her. The young lady arrived at the estate and saw that a new notification had arrived that her mission had been completed. Kona was very happy that she was able to complete the mission and also get the book. She knew that with the book she could take the story in a different direction without the pregnancy. Kona frantically wanted to go up to the room and start reading. Eran looked at her and asked who the suicide bomber was that dared to do something like that to her face. He was furious and did not understand who dared to offend her. The young lady hesitated, not knowing what to answer. He looked at her and said that she needed to be cured first. She looked at him and said that it was just a scratch, and it would heal quickly so that there was no need to waste a healing potion on it. The young man looked at her and with a stern look said that he himself would decide what was needed and what was not, so he told her to raise her head immediately. He desperately wanted to help her and save her from pain. The young lady was shocked, but she was also very embarrassed, because I didn't expect something like this from him. She thanked him for helping her. She was pleased by his concern. He looked at her intently and said that he wanted to clarify something again. Eran said that her body belongs to him, so that no one dares to touch even a hair on her head without his permission. She knew that today was so productive, since she received the magic book and completed the mission. But most of all, something bothered her. The young man looked at her and asked what was bothering her. She looked at her companion and said that Jeffrey said that there was a man who wanted to disfigure her, and he decided to help this man. She said that it was therefore possible that someone had set it up on purpose. The young man was shocked by her words. He could not understand who needed this. Kona looked at him closely. She liked the expression on his face and knew that he would kill everyone. After her words, he left her in a hurry and said that he had too much work. But still, Kona knew that he left her for a reason, and she was very happy about it. She knew that now that she was alone, she can put magic into practice. The young lady read the book intently and after a while found what she was looking for. She saw a pregnancy potion. If taken within 24 hours, the magic test would show that she was pregnant. The contraceptive product is a highly effective method that has never failed. However, this type of contraception can only be used once a month. The young lady was shocked as the ingredients were very simple, but she also knew that she couldn't use it only once a month. Be that as it may, she wondered where she even got the recipe for such a drug. Kona knew that these potions would help create a completely new storyline, one without pregnancy. The thought that she will carry a child will force Eran to marry her secretly from the family. Then all of Rebecca's actions will be expected for her. She was very sorry that she would have to deceive Eran with a false pregnancy, but she had no other choice. She was very glad that she was able to receive such a book and decided to immediately begin preparing magic potions. Sometime later, she managed to prepare a potion. She knew that all that remained was to seduce Eran, and this was as easy as shelling pears, since he frantically wanted to get her. After his thoughts, the young man called her and asked what she was thinking about so intently. The young lady was taken aback because she was scared of him. Kona didn't expect him to come so unexpectedly. He looked at her and asked what she was doing at this hour instead of sleeping. She said in confusion that she simply couldn't sleep. She looked at him and asked why he came to her at such a time. She asked what happened. He looked at her and said that he just wanted to look at her, but since she was not sleeping, he had something to tell her. He said Jeffrey's body was recently discovered. The young lady was shocked as she did not expect something like this. She couldn't figure out if it was true. She didn't understand who needed to kill him. He said the man was killed with a dagger through his throat, and they are currently searching for a suspect. He said Jeffrey might have crossed someone's path. He said that there was no help to be expected from the city authorities. The young lady thought about it. Kona didn't know whether it was Rebecca or not. She thought it was too cruel for her. The young man said that he spent the whole evening studying Jeffrey's biography, but never found out anything. He said that he wanted to catch him and interrogate him, but now this is impossible. He was very upset about this. He said that tomorrow he was going to check his body and study it carefully. He wanted to know whether it was a revenge killing or a murder to remove an accomplice. He said that there were people who were planning to harm her, but he also looked at her and asked her not to worry about anything, because he will find them all. Kona was shocked by his words, as she did not expect this. The young man said that he thought that he would be very busy for some time, since it was unknown what dangers might await her, so he asked her not to leave the room. She knew that this would only benefit her, so she obediently agreed. Kona knew that she could now study the book properly. She knew that if Rebecca had already inherited so much, then it would not harm her to do so, and Eran said. He didn't come to her for several days, so this morning Kona sent a note through the maid, and he replied that he would come in the evening. Kona knew she finally had time. Under the influence of alcohol and in a playful mood, it was possible to pretend that the night spent was an accident. She followed her plan and was glad that everything was going as planned. She knew that this was a wonderful reason to get pregnant. The young lady did not know how much she needed to drink to achieve the desired state. The young man came to her that evening. He saw her from her fireplace and was surprised because she was drinking. He looked at her and asked in surprise what she wanted to talk to him about if she drank so much. She was furious because he was late, and she emptied almost the entire bottle and almost forgot what she wanted to tell him. But still, she decided to gather her thoughts and move on to her plan. However, thanks to the alcohol she drank, Kona was able to tell him everything she had prepared. Kona looked at him and asked what he was doing now. The young man, puzzled, said that he was still investigating the case related to Jeffrey's death. The young lady looked at him and asked why he was working so hard. He was surprised by her question, but also said that all this was because for her sake, it was important for him to find the one who was behind Jeffrey. She looked at him and, hesitatingly, said that sometimes she didn't understand at all why he tried so hard for her. She knew that he had announced marriage, although he had no intention of doing so. He defended her when he heard insults directed at her, and sometimes he avoided her for a long time, but as soon as she got hurt, he was immediately there. She still couldn't understand him. Kona looked at him and asked who she was to him. He was surprised by such a question and said that he, of course, assumed that she was slow-witted, but not that much. He was puzzled and asked her why she didn't see something so obvious. He said that for him, she is the only one he always wants to kiss. The young lady called his name. He looked at her and said that he was listening to her carefully. She looked at him and asked in a gentle voice if he would kiss her. The young lady looked at her lover and could not believe what was happening. He tenderly kissed every inch of her body. He looked at her beautiful eyes and said that tonight he would not fall asleep again, but the reason why he could not rest, on the contrary, he really liked. The young lady woke up after a hot night. Kona woke up and saw that Eran had left. She was a little surprised. She knew that she urgently needed to drink the potion. She had already been in the estate for 2 months. The plot twist would not happen until there was a pregnancy test. She knew that the time had come to win her comrades over to her side. The young lady smiled and offered the maid some tea. The young maid was surprised, and in turn thanked the mistress for such an opportunity. The girl's name is Phileda. She was a maid on the estate, and the young girl also helped her get ingredients for the potion. She was a kind-hearted girl and seemed to really like Kona. Kona knew that it would be very easy to win her over to her side. The young lady looked at the maid and said that it must be very difficult to collect and trim roses for her every day. The young maid said in a trembling voice that everything was not like that at all. The young lady looked at the maid and said that she knew there were maids who didn't like it. A moment later, the young lady said that she knew that the Felitas did this with great pleasure. The young lady thanked her with a smile on her face, and also asked if she could accept the gift from her. I, the maid, was surprised. Because I knew that the gift was so expensive and branded, she couldn't understand why the lady still decided to give her this. The young lady said that Eran could simply lose interest in her at any moment, and she could leave this place. But while she is at the estate, she would like to give at least one person a gift, namely the person who has been kind to her. The young maid looked at her mistress and asked her not to talk like that, since the gentleman was not one of those who treat women so simply and frivolously. The maid looked at the mistress with eyes full of tears and asked not to talk about her departure. The maid said that if the mistress needed any help, she could tell her, and she would help in any way she could. The young lady thanked the maid for her kindness and support. She was very glad that she got a maid, since Kona knew that she had +1 ally in her direction. Eran looked at her and said that he wanted to come to her earlier, but still there was no time. He looked at her and asked if she was okay. Kona smiled and said that she was doing well thanks to him. He looked at her and said that he actually had news for her. The young lady was puzzled because she saw that something was bothering him. Kona looked at him and asked what happened. The young man gave her a letter and said that it was from his childhood friend. He also said that Rebecca sent an invitation. The young lady was confused and did not understand what she wanted from her. This year, the buds of colorful roses were ripening in the Malacca's garden, and Rebecca would like to invite her good friend to enjoy the wonderful aroma of blooming roses. The young lady knew that this was an unexpected invitation from a friend. She also knew that this was not the case in the original. She realized that Rebecca must have been very interested in how Kona managed to defeat her plan. The young man said that Rebecca said that she would be honored if Kona and he would join her. The young lady was surprised. She asked him if he would let her go. The young man said that they would go together so that no one and nothing would threaten her. The young lady looked down, puzzled, and said that she was worried that the same thing that happened at the garden party might happen again, and that was why she was very worried. The young man came closer to her, holding her hand. He told her not to worry, since Rebecca was the hostess of the event, and they would make sure that no one dared to offend her. The young man looked at his companion and said that his childhood friend was very kind and sweet. The young lady was shocked by his words, as she knew that he was very naive and did not see the obvious. She looked at him and said that in that case she would go. Since he said that everything would be fine, she would believe him. The young lady looked at her companion and said that she thought that he and Rebecca were very close. He looked at the young lady and said that it was so, because you can even say that she is his best friend. Eran looked at her and said that Rebecca was indeed a very good person. He said that she would be able to see this when she got to know her, and she also had a good reputation in society. So she needed to befriend her. The young lady knew what Rebecca was like, but she still smiled and said that she couldn't wait to meet his best friend. The young man looked at her and asked if she was really looking forward to meeting. The young lady said that she was looking forward to it because he said everything correctly, and she was looking forward to a wonderful meeting. They drove up to the estate where the reception was supposed to take place. The young man looked at his companion and asked how she was feeling. The young lady looked at him and said with a smile that she was fine, and he had nothing to worry about since she was no longer nervous. He looked at her and said with a smile that he was very happy. The reason Kona agreed to go is because she wants to see her arch-enemy Rebecca in person. She also knew that it would be nice to expand her circle of acquaintances. Before they could get out of the carriage, they came across a young lady. She was very glad that they came. The young lady looked at her lover's friend with a smile. She was glad that they had finally met. Rebecca looked at her friend and said that she was very glad that he accepted her invitation. Rebecca was the main villain of the novel. Rebecca looked at the young lady and said that she was very pleased to meet her. The young people were sitting in the garden and having a meal. Kona knew that eating together was, of course, fun, but the fact that she was not included in the conversation made her very wary. Rebecca looked at her friend and said with a smile that the dish he was eating was made from shellfish brought yesterday, and it just melted in his mouth. She wanted him to try it. The young man looked at her and thanked her with a smile. The young lady was in shock and did not understand what Rebecca was doing. She was shocked that they continued to talk informally. She didn't realize how close friends they were. But still, the young lady decided to calm down a little and pull herself together. She calmed herself down because she knew that today she didn't come to deal with her. Kona looked at Rebecca and said that the food was really delicious. Rebecca thanked Lady Kona with a smile. Rebecca looked at her and told her not to be afraid. The young lady hesitated to call her by name. She smiled and said that things between her and Eran were still unconfirmed. Rebecca looked at her and said that if Eran brought her as an escort, it means that she is important to him, and they can also become friends. Rebecca looked at her and said that she could safely call her by her name. Kona knew that Rebecca just wanted to keep her under control, but she still couldn't call her by her name. Rebecca looked at her and asked with a smile if she could call her by her name. Kona was a little puzzled and, looking at Rebecca, said that if she so wished, she could call her by her name. Rebecca smiled and said that was good, and she could also call her by her name. Kona smiled and agreed with her. She said she would definitely do so. The young lady looked at them from afar. Rebecca looked at them and said that she would really like to chat with them more, but as the hostess, she had other things to do. So she needs to go check everything. The young lady smiled, agreeing with the hostess, and thanked her for the pleasant acquaintance. Kona thought that soon her following of Rebecca would end. Rebecca slowly left her guests. The young man looked after her and said that it seemed that they were preparing for an event. She was surprised and did not understand what event they were talking about. The young man said that it looked like they were preparing for the production of perfumes. He said that royalty and noble ladies attending the event could create their own perfumes from the roses of the Malacca's gardens. He looked at her and said that if she was uncomfortable, then they could stay away. The young lady smiled and said that everything was fine and she was more than comfortable. Kona said she would be very interested in creating a fragrance with Rebecca. Rebecca looked at everyone present and asked if everyone had chosen roses. She said that from the roses they chose, they would make their own perfume. Rebecca walked closer to the young lady and asked if she would mind if she joined her. Kona was a little surprised but said in turn that she didn't mind and would even be glad. Rebecca looked at her and said that to make it clearer to her, she would try to explain it to her as simply as possible. The young lady thanked her new friend, but she still knew that Rebecca's only goal was to humiliate Kona once again. But still, she wanted to play by her rules a little, pretending to be a fool, so that later she could take her by surprise. Rebecca showed the young lady the vials. She said that the first bottle of perfume is for base notes, the other 3 bottles are for middle notes, the others also have their place. Rebecca said that it is the middle notes that have the greatest impact on the longevity of a scent. She said that this is why in all the perfumes that she prepared, the middle notes are the scent of roses. Rebecca dropped a little scent onto a piece of paper and invited the young lady to smell it. Rebecca looked at the Kona and asked which flavor she liked best. The young lady was puzzled. She said she didn't even know. Kona smiled and asked if she could just choose the same as Rebecca. Rebecca looked at her and said that the roses she chose were different from each other, so they would be the highlight. The young lady watched Kona and Rebecca closely. She said furiously that she couldn't listen to this anymore. The young lady said that she was being offensive, and Rebecca accepted it without noticing any problem. She was shocked and did not understand since when the event had become such a low-level event. Kona was very surprised when she saw Lady Heroish. The young ladies looked at the lady and said that she was so rude and were surprised that she appeared at the event again. They said she just had a terrible temper. They also said that she has a very strange hobby, magic and spells, which is probably why she is so hot-tempered and eccentric. Rebecca looked at her guest and told her not to pay attention to her. Since she is famous for her harsh statements and her harsh temper, Kona didn't answer but simply lowered her eyes. A moment later, she looked at Rebecca and said that perhaps she needed to walk a little. Rebecca was a little puzzled and shouted to Kanya to wait, as she needed to go the other way. The young lady looked intently at Kona from under her forehead. Kanal, in turn, did not take her eyes off the young lady. The young lady looked at her and asked if she had come to apologize to her. Kona said that she did not need her apology in any way. The young lady said there was no point in pretending otherwise. She asked what else she would need to follow her for, if not for an apology. Kona said that it probably gave the impression that the uneducated commoner was being manipulated by socialites. Kona looked at the young lady and asked if it was unpleasant for her to watch all this. The young lady was at a loss. She did not expect such a conversation with Kona. Kona looked at her and, with a smile on her face, thanked the young lady for not keeping silent, because she could have just passed by. Kona said with a smile that she was terribly tired of making these useless perfumes. Kona looked at her and asked if she would like to talk for a while. The young lady looked away from Kona, said that she did not understand what she was talking about. She did not intend to engage in small talk with her. Kona said that she heard that the young lady has a bit of a strange hobby. Kona said that if the young lady doesn't mind, then she can help her with this. Kona smiled and said that, to be honest, she doesn't know much about magic. Rebecca walked past Kona and saw her sitting with a saddened look. Rebecca approached the young lady and said that while she was away, she made perfume for her. Kona looked at Rebecca and thanked her for the perfume. Kona looked at Rebecca and thought that she seemed to think that Kona was very depressed, but in turn, Kona managed to interest and make a new friend. Since as soon as she started talking about magic, her eyes just lit up. In general, Kona expected this, given her open hostility towards Rebecca, but she was not the villain. She knew that it would be useful to get to know her better, so she was thinking of sending her an invitation soon. Kona knew that sometimes it was good to have someone on her side, outside the manor. Kona was glad that she was able to get closer to her new friend. The events were planned to last until the evening, but they decided to leave early. Rebecca looked at the young people and said that she was very glad that they came to her today. Rebecca smiled at Kona and said that she was very glad to meet her again. Kona smiled at her and said that she should be the one thanking her for the invitation. She also said that she would look forward to their next meetings. The young man looked at his girlfriend and said that in that case they would already leave. Rebecca looked at them and asked them to drive more carefully. The young man looked at his companion and said that it was time for them to return. Rebecca stared after them. A month after the Rose Festival, there was a series of rather busy days. She made friends with the maid and a new friend and practiced magic in her free time. And today was her pregnancy test day. Kona wanted to use the fake pregnancy potion since it was already ready. Kona knew that everything would go as it should and there would be no problems. Kona knew that such a product was not difficult to make, but she was still very worried. But I was sure that everything would be fine. The young lady sat waiting. Eran went into her room and said that a magician had come to them for a determination. The magician humbly greeted the young lady. He decided not to delay the process and wanted to get down to business immediately. The young lady was engulfed in a glow. Eran looked at the young lady and at the magician. He frantically wanted to know the result of the test. Eran moved a little further with the magician from Kona and Mag with a smile and congratulated Eran on the good news. Eran, the magician, was surprised and said that he felt for the birth of a new life. Kona was surprised. She, of course, expected a positive result, but she was still not completely sure. The magician looked at the young lady and said with a smile that she was pregnant. Kona, in turn, was overjoyed that her plan worked. The young people looked intently at the magician. Eran was a little puzzled. He looked at the magician and told him not to talk about today's result for now. The magician, in turn, said that he would do so. Eran looked at the magician and said that a servant was already waiting for him outside. So he just needs to follow him. Eran looked closely at his companion. She was a little surprised by his reaction. The young man looked at Kona and said that he had something to tell her. The young lady was waiting. She did not know what he wanted to tell her, but of course, she suspected but was not completely sure. He looked at her and said that they urgently needed to take wedding vows, and he also told her to prepare immediately. She was shocked because she was not ready to take wedding vows right now. Kona didn't understand why he decided to act in such a hurry. She was simply shocked and could not understand why now, since she was not at all ready for this. In the original, the wedding vows were pronounced 3 days after the test results. She was shocked that he decided to get married immediately after receiving the test, regardless of the result. Kona looked at him and asked if the marriage of the head of the family should not be discussed at the family meeting. The young man said that this is exactly how it is, but today is not family meeting day. He said that he had told her earlier that the direct descendants of the family had been infertile for several generations. Therefore, he does not need permission to marry the woman who is carrying his child. The young lady was shocked. She didn't understand what had happened to his logic. He said that his father said when they first met that if she was pregnant, they could get married. Kona knew that this was not the case. Kona knew this was a big problem. She noticed that he was serious, and right now he was really ready to get married. She knew that of course they would take marriage vows, but she also knew that if they rushed, there might be trouble. And if the family found out that he secretly swore an oath to her, then he would be in big trouble. If only to recognize his behavior as wrong, she knew she needed to slow down. She looked at him and asked him to listen to her. Kona said that, of course, she understands that he wants to do everything quickly and secretly. Looking away, Kona said that she thought he was in a big hurry now. She looked at him and said that today's test results were quite unexpected for her. Moreover, the news about the wedding unsettled her. She said she needed some time to collect her thoughts. The young man looked at her, puzzled. He decided to leave her so that she could figure everything out. He said he would be back tomorrow, but in the meantime, he needed to make sure everything was prepared properly. He looked at her and said that as a last resort, they would say their vows the day after tomorrow. He looked at her with a cold gaze and told her to keep it in mind. The young lady was a little puzzled by his behavior. She knew that until tomorrow she would continue to pretend that she was not ready for the wedding. 2 days later, they slowly and secretly went to church to take oaths of allegiance. She knew that after a few days, they still had to go and take their wedding vows. Until this morning, Eran had expressed silent protest. He looked at her intently and said that if she refused again, he would drag her away in his arms. Kona knew that they had reached the desired condition. Kona looked at him and said with a smile that she agreed to take marriage vows. He was very surprised, but in turn very glad that she finally decided. She looked at him and said that, unfortunately, she did not have a family, but this child was her first family. He looked at her and said with a gentle smile that not only their child would become her family, as he also intended to become part of her family. After that, she didn't even have time to look back when they had already arrived at the temple. She noticed that the young man was well prepared. They slowly held the wedding ceremony. The Holy Father looked at them and said that he was solemnly concluding the marriage of Eran and Kona. Now she and Eran were truly legally married. Kona was very happy about this. The Holy Father looked at them and said that upon completion of the ceremony, they would become husband and wife in the eyes of God. And from that moment on, it was solemnly necessary to observe the words spoken in the temple before God. The young lady looked intently at her husband. Kona was very happy. The young man looked at her and said that fortunately they had already said their vows. She was very nervous. But while she was answering the priest, everything was over in the blink of an eye. She knew that, of course, nothing would change immediately, but she was very pleased. He looked at her and asked if she was okay. The young lady smiled and said that she was fine. She was just a little lost in thought. Kona looked at him and said that now it was time for them to go back as he would be in big trouble if anyone finds out where he was. He looked at her and asked her to wait a couple of minutes. Kona was surprised. He looked at her and put the ring on her finger. He said they said their vows, so now they must exchange gifts. Eran said that he would be very happy and grateful if she liked his gift. He said that he would like her to have a gorgeous wedding, with a beautiful wedding dress, but unfortunately, they have to keep the secret. The young lady was a little puzzled and upset because she had not prepared a gift for him. He looked at her and with a smile presented her with another ring. He said that if she put it on him herself, it would be the best wedding gift. The young lady looked at the ring shyly and slowly put the ring on her finger. She looked at him and sheepishly thanked him. The young man looked at her in response and asked why don't they have dinner now. Kona said it was a great idea. The day when she and Eran officially became husband and wife was one of the happiest days since she got into Roman, and after a while she received a letter from Rebecca.